Ready, Robin?
I'm ready.
Okay.
All systems?
I'd like to call this meeting of the Prescott Unified Governing Board to order, now that we have all of our machinery running. Welcome to those few of you who are able to be with us today. It's so nice to see the board actually sitting in our seats, so thank you for managing to get here tonight. Arden, how about the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, did you all receive the agenda?
Yes.
Any changes or additions to the agenda? Could I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion that we approve the agenda as published.
Second.
Okay, it's been a motion and a second to approve the agenda as published. All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, agenda is approved. You also should have received the minutes from the governing board meeting of March 2nd. Any corrections to those minutes? Could I get a motion to approve them?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the regular study and voting session meeting of March 2nd, 2021 as presented.
Second that.
Okay. There's been a motion and a second that we approve the minutes from the regular study and voting session meeting of March 2nd, 2021 as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. We are ready for our monthly presentation from one of our schools regarding culture in our schools. And this month, we have Taylor Hicks with us. So I will turn it over to Principal Kelsey Secor to introduce her parents.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having us on tonight. I'm so excited to share these three amazing families with you. So first, we have Angie Claudier, who is with us. She's got one current Bobcat and a former Taylor Hicks student. Both of them are really incredible kiddos, and it's been such an honor to watch them grow up in our schools. Angie, you're also a former PHS alumni, right?
Correct. Graduated in 2001, as did my husband.
Nice. We also have Kendall Brown, who's with us. She has a current Taylor Hicks Bobcat and a former Taylor Hicks Bobcat. He's a fifth grader up at Granite. What's really special about Kendall, she's got some great perspective, not only as a parent, but she's also a former teacher from Taylor Hicks. And she was a rock star. One of these days, we're hoping to get her back in the classroom. I'll keep bugging her every now and again. But she really was an incredible teacher. And then last but not least, we have Horton, who's with us. She is also PHS alumni. We actually went to school and grew up together, which is a beautiful thing about Prescott. But she's got three Bobcats, two former, one current, and her husband Aaron was also, he went to Taylor Hicks as well. So she's also got some great perspective to share with us. So Angie, do you want to go first for us and kick it off?
Love to. Y'all don't know this, but I actually have really bad stage fright. But I love Taylor Hicks so much that I really wanted to do this. And Kelsey gave me an opportunity, so I prepared just a whole speech here, and I hope you'll forgive me for reading it rather than trying to remember everything. Just real quick, thank you guys for doing this and giving us an opportunity to speak as parents. I really appreciate the board and everything that they do. So a quick thank you for having me. So I'm just going to start reading. There are a lot of stories that I can tell you about why I love Taylor Hicks. So instead, let me tell you about my son. Michael came to traumatized from his previous home. When you become a foster parent, they give you a lot of tools to prepare you for taking in a child that's been through trauma. What they don't prepare you for is that you'll meet a lot of uninformed and sometimes really nasty people that have already decided that a 5-year-old boy is a throwaway youth because he's a foster child and he doesn't fit inside their box. By the time I put Mike in elementary school, he was better, but we knew that we had a long way to go. At that time, he was not enrolled at PUSD. We lived somewhere else, and every day of elementary school, my son came home broken and sad because of the way adults treated him at school. He once drew a picture totally unprompted of being held down by 5 adults with only the word sad written on it. By the time he reached 1st grade, we were all traumatized, and I knew that it was time to move. My husband and I both graduated from Prescott High School, and I felt strongly that Mike would thrive at PUSD, so we moved to Prescott and enrolled both of our kids at Taylor Hicks. From the moment we met with Miss Secor and the PUSD team, I knew we were in a better place, and that has never failed to be true. Taylor Hicks spent the time to get to know and listen to us as parents and work to meet Michael where he was at and help him grow. Michael blossomed and improved at record speed, and in 4 short years, we went from assigning him a special aid and considering him for your Bridges program to discussing having him tested for advanced classes and getting straight A report cards from teachers that say he's a joy to have in class. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I cried when I got that report card. Our time at Taylor Hicks has been a partnership, and every moment of that partnership has been a blessing. Recently, Ms. Secor asked me if Michael would consider staying in 4th grade for another year, because even though she knew he was ready to move on, she wasn't ready for him to leave. And we feel the same way about Taylor Hicks. We never want to leave, but we know it's time to grow up and learn new things. It's hard to find fault with a place that has been so integral to our growth as a family. I will say that I don't know if PUSD has a board-certified behavior analyst on staff still, but I hope that they do. His initial insights into Mike's behavior are what put us on the right path. Additionally, as I'm sure you're aware, a recent report found that Arizona has the lowest wages for teachers in the nation. The old adage goes that you get what you pay for, and I don't think that's true at Taylor Hicks. I think you got what you didn't pay enough for. You probably already know that you're very lucky to have found an amazing group of people that love kids enough to stay in spite of the personal financial burden. And I hope that they continue to stay, but I also hope that you're doing everything in your power as a board to pay them more and incentivize them staying.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I thought she froze.
Thank you, Angie. I made it without crying, but barely. Good job. Watching her son grow up through our school has probably been one of the highlights of my entire career, and I could not be more proud of that little young man that he has turned out to be. So thanks for sharing him with us. Kendall, do you want to go next?
Right. Hi, everybody. And like you, Angie, I thought I better write my ideas down to articulate them clearly. So I'm going to read. It says, my name is Kendall Brown, and there are many things I appreciate about Taylor Hicks. My son attended school there from kindergarten through 4th grade, and my daughter is currently in kindergarten at this grade school. The genuine care, meaningful relationships, supportive community, and focus on character building are among the top things I am grateful for at Taylor Hicks. My kids have always felt safe, seen, and valued there. I have watched seemingly small yet impactful daily routines that the teachers do to help cultivate this. This includes things like daily asking students to share good news from their lives or greeting every student individually at the door. True care has also been communicated by big, out-of-their-way things the teachers have done for my kids. Like when Mrs. Bull and Miss Burris visited my son at home after he had a small surgery in 1st grade. Or when Miss Schuler sent letters in the mail to my daughter when their class couldn't be together during COVID. Taylor Hicks does a great job recognizing and celebrating students through various character, academic, and effort awards. Their practice of taking the time to have a monthly spirit assembly to gather as a school community has always been one of my favorite traditions there. time he spent in those groups was positive and beneficial. His reading teachers, like Mrs. Allen and Miss Ketchum, were invested in him and always so encouraging to our son. Now, as a 5th grader, our son loves reading and is excelling in honors ELA. Taylor Hicks has also been supportive with math. When the new math curriculum came on board, my son and us as parents struggled to adjust. The school did a great job supporting us through this transition with things like math curriculum parent night and providing us with resources such as websites and videos that were so helpful. Mrs. Kaiser was such a great cheerleader and support for our son through the math struggles and steadfastly communicated that she wanted him to succeed and would provide whatever support necessary to get him there. There was also a math interventionist that I know was helpful in 3rd grade to my son. Taylor Hicks didn't let my son slip through the cracks, but identified his needs in these areas and provided him with the help he needed in order to achieve. As for writing, we can't say enough about the fun, challenging, and creative atmosphere Miss Runyon created in her ELA class that cultivated a love for writing in our son. For my kindergartner, despite the challenges of this year, she nonetheless has been given the strong foundations she needs in order to succeed in ELA and math. It's so exciting to watch things beginning to click for her as she's begun to put the pieces together and is beginning to read, write, and compute numbers. Clear and frequent communication is another thing I appreciate about Taylor Hicks. Parent info nights and weekly emails from both Kelsey and teachers are so informative. We also are so thankful for the art, music, PE, and library classes of Taylor Hicks. These have been so important for our kids and impacted them in meaningful ways. Academic and enrichment class have also been beneficial for our kids. And although I know we aren't focusing solely on the struggles with COVID over the past year, I just want to say that the school did a great job providing us with the communication and support we needed to help our kids grow, even during the difficult circumstances this year. Our daughter's teacher communicated so positively and frequently with parents and kids, always offering support. I can't imagine how challenging teaching online kindergarten would be, but we watched her do it with such grace and joy, and our daughter learned much through it all. We have seen Taylor Hicks navigate this difficult year with grit, positivity, and flexibility. To sum it up, Taylor Hicks has provided the genuine care, meaningful relationships, professional skill, and educational opportunities to help my kids flourish, and for that, I'm so grateful. And for the what suggestions do you have to make your experience at Taylor Hicks even better? I said this is hard to answer because we truly are satisfied with our experience at Taylor Hicks. If we had to suggest something, maybe it would be to strengthen the science and social studies curriculum or including more field trips. Again, we say this humbly and with the recognition that the school is already doing so much. We really don't feel like we can ask for more.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? All right. Thank you.
All right, Hillary, I think you're up next.
Okay, you two are hard to follow here. So I'm Hillary Horton, and I have, we've been at Taylor Hicks for 8 years now. So it's kind of become a second family for us. My husband went there growing up. So we have nothing but praise for the school. We grew up locally. I went to Lincoln with Kelsey, and Aaron grew up here. With Taylor Hicks, we lived around the corner. We had no question of where we could send our kids. We have very big supporters of the public school. So just around the corner was Taylor Hicks. We're like, well, we're going to send them there. We've had nothing, wonderful experiences. I could go on and on. We've been there a very long time. But over the years, you know, staff changes, obviously kids grow up, but the family environment has always remained the same. It's very comforting. The last 2 years, not this year, but previously, I was the president of the PTA, which was wonderful, and I loved being part of the school, and I almost feel like I've lost my family this last year. You're not in the schools as much, but we're happy to carry on the tradition of the Bobcats, and there's been to, and the teachers and the staff have jumped right in. They dealt with the issues, and they've made it, they've kept an eye on it and addressed whatever the issues were. And I know it's a very, very safe environment. I have no concerns when they're at school. Like, you send them off to your second family and they're taken care of. Let's see, there's nothing, I had trouble with the end part of like suggestions of what I would change or do. And there's really not too much we came up with. You know, of course, this last year has been very different. And you know, I kind of feel knowing I have a kindergarten, fifth, and an eighth. And so kindergarten this year obviously is very different from what it has been in the past. And that's kind of been hard. He doesn't know any different. I think he's done wonderful, and the support and the energy and from his teacher has been amazing. I just feel I'm used to being in the classroom or being a little more involved. So that's been hard this year for that. But I know there's precautions and everything, and I totally understand. But I think in the future, as things start to look better, hoping to do even like by class, like age kindergartners can do something, not maybe necessarily the whole school, but a little something so we get to know some of the other kids. Because I don't really know any kids in his class. That's kind of hard, but it's been a wonderful experience for many years, and I'm glad I have a few more years left with the little guy. But from all the staff, teachers, you know, custodians, the lunch women, everybody, it's been amazing. So I can't speak highly enough of Taylor Hicks, and we will be Bobcats till the end.
Thank you very much. Board members, any comments or questions or anything for Principal Secor?
Kelsey, it sounds like you have a great atmosphere over there, and you're building a fantastic family with those parents, teachers, and students. So congratulations. And thank you.
Well, thank you guys for letting us share a little bit about our school, and I cannot thank Angie and Kendall and Hillary enough for coming. I know this is a little bit out of your comfort zone, but I really, truly appreciate you sharing your experience with everybody.
Anything else? Ladies, thank you so much for taking your time to come and visit with us. All right. The next item on our agenda is assessment data.
Make you feel good? You're part of it.
Joe, are you going to introduce this,
I
or
will.
Renee,
We
or?
have Renee Steingraber. She's our testing coordinator. Renee, you've been with us 4 years, 3?
This is December of 2017.
She's been with us
That's
for
when
a
I
few
arrived.
years. She brings with us many, many years of master teacher work, and she's presented to the board before, and we asked her today to bring kind of a high view of all of the many different assessments we use and kind of give us an idea of how and why we use those, and give some examples of how that's made changes occur in the past, and then also for the board to see that and be thinking about where we might want to take a deeper dive as a board. You know, there's data that's obviously made for the classroom level, and there's data that's made to compare students across the state and nation, and there's standardized data and all kinds of different things. So just we've done very clear about all board to ask questions and be thinking about and do some follow-up with the board in terms of where should we dive deeper as a board. Where do you have questions? Where do you want to see more about how we're performing and how we're using this data to inform our instruction? Because that's what it's all about. We use data to inform instruction on an individual level, on class levels, on school levels, and district levels. It drives really everything we do, and we'll tie in as time goes the many things we do. Like for 8 years now, the week after school gets out, we get teams from every school together, and we dive into data and we create the goals, or we call them trilaterals, for the entire next year. So there are many ways we use data, and we want to start with a high-level clarification of that. And I can't think of a more professional person who knows and understands deeply than Renee.
Thank you very much for the introduction and
You bet.
the whole setup for kind of what I'm going to go over and what we do. So throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me and ask, and to make sure that you understand what is being presented to you today. So assessment data is what I'm here to talk about for student achievement. And Sarah, if the arrows work.
On the keyboard,
Yeah.
they don't work?
No. So as soon as we get the arrows working. Okay. Is it on? It is on.
Something we've learned a lot about in the last
Yep.
year, technical difficulties and how to work right through them. Sarah Torres, the multitasker.
We will figure this out.
Only got about 5 devices going right now.
Yeah.
Right. Multiple
There we
things
go.
plugged in. Good?
You got her.
I have to do it from my chair.
Okay.
Okay, well, you probably can't hear me if I stand there, huh? I'm going to be saying, if I say click too much, it'll be
Yeah.
annoying. So I'm wondering if I stand here. Will it? All right, I'm going to be saying click a lot, Sarah. Okay? So, all right, here we go, the old-fashioned way. Click, turn, click. Not yet, but. So, all right. So the ultimate goal of any school is to educate all students, right? So specifically, click, what does that mean? That means all students. And that's what we're doing here at PUSD. From our students who are the lowest achievers to the highest achievers in our gifted program. That's our plan of action. So obviously, in one back. All right, so at PUSD with the Every Child, Every Day, I think that really kind of captures everything what we're trying to do, not only with what we do in the classroom, just in teaching and learning, but also in the data that we provide. So the next slide, talking about data, there's a couple things that we need to understand and have a common understanding of as we talk about data and how to discuss it. So the first thing is, what is it? What is data? The second thing, why we use it, what is the purpose of using it, what's the purpose of a test if you're not going to use the data, but a waste of time. So that's why it's so important that the assessments that we are choosing are things that provide data that we can use. And finally, how we use it at PUSD. I'm going to take you through a couple scenarios to show you how we actually use the data. So to start with, what is data? And I tried to keep it as simple as we could, and it's simply information that's used to make instructional decisions and improve student learning. First, most people understand, who really are into the data, understand what quantitative and qualitative are. So quantitative, easily put, is simply a measure. It's the numbers. If you're looking at the percent proficiency, the grade on a grade card, those are all measurable things for quantitative. The qualitative is more, some people think of it more of opinion, but it's an opinion based on some data. As I look around the room here, I'm gathering data. I'm looking and thinking, most of you are paying attention, even though your mind might be on something else. But I can assume that you're paying attention because you're looking and nodding with me. That's a little bit of qualitative data. A teacher in the classroom uses that kind of data when she asks or he asks a quick question and checks the student's response. That's all qualitative types of data. The next one, attendance. There are many variables that affect our data. And we can have attendance data to see how many times kids are present and how many kids are absent, but also how attendance impacts their learning. If they're not there to learn, it's highly likely that their scores are not going to be higher because they're not in attendance. Also, discipline. Discipline is an issue, and we all have classes, we all know people who have some discipline issues. And the reality is, maybe they're in the classroom and they have these issues going on. Unless they're dealt with effectively, students can't learn. So discipline impacts data. A big thing that impacts data is simply perception. Perception. I have had the opportunity since I've been here that I test the gifted kids, which has really been fun, and I've learned a lot about them. But I've also learned through our gifted teacher that gifted kids are really, really hard on themselves if they don't get a 100%. So their perception of testing, their perception of data, they're very hard on themselves. Students are. Students also, the perception of taking a test. Is it important? What is it going to do for me? For teachers, the perception of testing and getting data is very important. How will I use it? Because as I said in the beginning, if it's not usable data, why give it? So that's what we're trying to provide for our teachers and showing them how to use it. It's also very important, the perception of the board members. So the board members understand how we're using data, and especially for parents. Parents need to see the data that we have and be able to understand how it is used and why we collect that type of data. And finally, academic assessments. There's many assessments, but what I'm going to focus on tonight is the academic assessments. So moving on to the next one, why use it? There's 3 simple points. The first one being, we have to determine where students are at. We can't help our students if we don't know a baseline of where they're at, where they're coming in, what their needs are, what their skills are, or what skills they need to learn. Also to determine the curriculum. Our data, especially our big data, some of it that we're going to look at tonight, it gives us an idea and we can infer, is our curriculum working or not working based on historical data? And finally, instructional strategies. We do a lot of professional development for the teachers here at PUSD. And a lot of that time is spent providing instructional strategies to help them differentiate instruction, differentiate curriculum for students, to work in small groups, to work in large groups, vertical articulation meetings where they meet at different grade levels. So our data can help us understand if the instructional strategies that our teachers are using are working. So we're going to start with assessments at PUSD as a quick just scan over them. The first one you probably most know about, formerly as AZ Merit or AIMS Science. This year it's AZM2 and AZ Sci. Those are state required assessments. We always look at those. But we always look at those with a discerning eye to understand that that is a summative assessment. That is a one day in time for our students given at the end of the year. So we look at it with that through that lens, and then we take that information in before making judgment on it. The next one being Galileo K through 12. Galileo K through 12 is what I came and presented to you guys before about the different components of Galileo. Galileo is our K through 12 benchmark assessment. It's given 3 times a year to our entire district. So we have a pre-assessment, a mid-year assessment, and the post-assessment. This assessment covers all standards that are required that we want our students to master by the end of the year. So when we give that pre-test, we don't expect the proficiency rates to be high because students haven't learned what is going on that year. A 5th grade student may not know everything they need to know at the end of the year, at the very beginning of the year. They won't. The same is true at mid-year. When we give the mid-year benchmark assessment, the purpose is to see, are they progressing toward mastery? Not have they mastered everything. We don't expect that from the data, but we expect to see, are they mastering what we've already taught? And it's kind of fun because you'll notice some kids actually will show they've mastered things that a teacher hasn't taught. And many of those are the gifted students who might be a gifted math student in there. The next one is STAR reading, and that is given to our students in K through 5. It is also a benchmark assessment, but most importantly, the move on when reading is a requirement. This year, we adapted STAR reading for K through 3 as part of the MOER requirements. In the past, DIBELS was given. However, the state put out a list of 7 new assessments and told us to review those assessments. And through working with a team of master teachers and a few administrators, we got together, reviewed the assessments that were available, and the STAR was chosen to be used. So that is the purpose of the STAR. But not only is it a benchmark assessment, it can also be used for progress monitoring in reading. The next assessment is kindergarten. And I shouldn't say kindergarten assessment, but the kindergarten teachers have come together to form a common assessment that assess the standards they are teaching and match the report cards that are given out, and it's all based on the state standards. So they have their own little set of common assessments across the district. And finally, classroom level data and the assessments that are given there. I think that is the one that most people don't see what's happening. It's the things I mentioned early on, like looking around the room and seeing who's participating, throwing out questions to your students to see how they're doing, the end of the module assessments in their math courses that they give, spelling tests. Those are all kinds of assessments that are given over time. Whereas the AZM2, Galileo, 3 times a year, they're single points in time. Classroom assessments are really, really important to know that if you've taught a skill, whether your students are getting that or not. So this is a quick overview of the assessments at PUSD. Yes?
Is the AZM2, that's new, I've never heard of it, is it comparable to the AZ Merit? Are we going to be able to compare the scores at all, or
Scores,
not?
yes. So AZ Merit, actually the last year for AZ Merit was the year before last. So in 19, spring of 19 was the last year for AZ Merit. Basically, the state changed it up a little bit, and they called it AZM2. That's the bottom line. So AZM2 was meant to be given last year and this year. Last year's tests were canceled, and so this is the only year right now. This is the first year that all districts in Arizona are giving the AZM2. So yes, it has the proficiency measures of like minimally proficient, proficient, highly proficient.
But, like level-wise, is it gonna be much harder, a little easier? Is it?
The state claims
changed?
it.
Is
The state
the
claims
same?
it will be comparable to the AZ Merit.
Okay. How many years have we had the Galileo testing?
So I've been here since 2017. It has been here. Marty, do you know when?
It was before I came in 2015.
I think
It's like-
12, yeah.
Have we, do we have historical data on how the Galileo testing, oh my gosh, the mask is done, the mask is doing it.
You can breathe.
Projects how their,
Over
our
time.
students. And
Yes.
do we have a correlation? Is it a good correlation or not? I mean,
So
is
original-
Galileo fairly accurate or not?
So I would say originally, we do have historical data, and I can pull past history, and we have pulled past history to a certain point. With any new assessment that comes into a system, the variables in it are very different. It's that acceptance of it. What is it going to do for me as a teacher? How can I see it? And what I noticed, like early on, there was a little bit more in certain grade levels, less acceptance of it. I think that's totally changed within the last 3 years. Teachers this year in the high school were asking to give the Galileo assessment in January. They needed and wanted data. So that part is true. We do have the historical data. To your question about having the comparison to the state test, they actually put out a forecast report, and they show the correlation, but they show it after the test. So after the test, I send the company the raw data. They merge it together with how many times the kids have passed, like the pre, post, in the middle. And yes, there is. And we did some research. Was it last year? I believe it was. And we did look at the correlation, and it has a high correlation of accuracy.
Okay.
I'll add, just because in 2014, being at Taylor Hicks and having teachers buy into the Galileo, I took the AZ Merit and Galileo and took the N test of Galileo and AZ Merit, and any students that passed at the developmental level of passing for Galileo and AZ Merit, I counted as a positive correlation. Anyone who didn't pass at the developmental level in Galileo and didn't pass AZ Merit was also a positive correlation in all of the tests. Science, math, and reading, they all had at least an 80% positive correlation to passing or not passing when compared.
Okay. And the Galileo, I've given it a couple times. I've done some research lately. It has some complicated algorithm. It may test on 5th grade data. I mean, what you're supposed to learn in 5th grade. But it has some weird, complicated algorithm that is going to take what week you are in school and integrate that into that data. So So it's already saying, say we're here on the first day, it's taking that into consideration that we haven't taught anything yet.
Right.
And it's saying what those kids are doing, and it's already giving us a perspective of who's gonna pass at the end.
Right,
Is
and
that
I'm
correct?
glad you mentioned that, because I'm thinking what you're referring to, it's called item response theory. And the item response theory, it actually has 3 parameters with the questions, and part of that is difficulty, discrimination, and guessing. So our higher level kids are going to get the challenge in there, and by the way they answer certain questions, that's one of the parameters that are in there for their predictions. So it is definitely research-based.
Okay, so it's all calculated on how much supposedly they've already been taught, though, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so Renee, can you explain to me, and hopefully everybody else, the idea of minimal proficiency versus highly proficient, and how that may correlate to knowing that we've got pre, mid, and end of year tests with Galileo. How does someone, for instance, that might be listed as minimally proficient mid-year, what's their chance look like of passing the AZM2 at the end of the year? Is there a way that you can do that predictively?
Can I take you through the next segment, and then I
Yes,
think it might answer
for
some
sure.
of your questions
Yeah,
in there.
definitely.
Because,
Thank
right,
you.
because one of the examples that I'm going to show you is how teachers use that. And I think that's what you're alluding to is, how do we get that minimally proficient, child proficient, right? Through
Right.
use of the data.
And-
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So can you explain to me, a student that's minimally proficient, is that student in danger of being retained, failing the course, not moving on at some point? Is that an accurate assessment of that student at that point?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If a student, so I would say absolutely if nothing in the classroom changes.
Right, okay.
If the student is only given the core curriculum and not giving any intervention, any
Right.
support outside of that, the core curriculum, yes.
So the key is that the teacher identifies this through the testing and takes remediation in the classroom to help that student along.
Absolutely.
So these are very individually based ways to develop a student's skills is what a Galileo test is designed to do. Is that correct?
The goal of it is to measure their progress towards mastery.
Okay.
So there is a different component of Galileo in that teachers can make formative assessments as well, like 5-question tests, little small quizzes. So the ideal thing is the teacher's looking at the data, they're separating the students into groups from low, mid, high, kind of, and not necessarily that. It's not that makes it sound like 3 groups. That's not true.
Right.
There's multiple groups. It kind of depends on the level of the students. But then they take those students and then provide them the intervention, the extra curriculum, the extra challenges that they need, including our gifted students. It's important to give them more enrichment as well. And they take that information and then they can create like a little 5-question standards-based quiz. So they've done an intervention for 6 weeks. They can do a quick little quiz to see if the student is getting the information or not.
I would just interject here also, a teacher is going to first find out if this is a motivation issue. Is this a can do or a won't do?
So-
And so if they can't do it, then you're going to do some remediation and intervention. If they just won't do it, then there's a motivation piece. And that's part of, I think, what we saw with taking Galileo at home with our older kiddos. They're just kind of at home, cruising through the questions, and we really didn't see every kiddo trying their best.
And that was I don't want to dominate too much of the time, but that was a question I had of you is how would you evaluate in-person or attendance, basically, if that's kind of the phrase for that, in the online and hybrid and its impact on learning versus what we've seen in the past? Students may not be as motivated online. They may not have the same push from their teachers or their peers
Right.
that they get in the classroom to do these exams. I know that would have been the case with me. It would have been really difficult for me to be motivated enough to get that done on my own if I had been stuck in an
Right.
online learning situation.
It has been truly an interesting year of testing,
Yeah.
and to see that, because as you know, we have our prep program, and so those students are only at home testing. And then we have the situation with, for example, our high school who tested at home. I was fortunate to have the experience of doing the STAR test with prep students who actually work with them. Based on what teachers have told me, what I have observed watching teachers test on the online system, as well as doing some of that myself, what we noticed in the elementary, in the younger kids, parents are parents, and no matter what the situation is, I truly believe parents love their children and they want to help them. And they want to help them a lot. So there are often times when I was doing some one-on-one testing with kindergarten students, and I would be talking to the student to have the student respond, and I could see them doing this constantly. And I'd say, hey, who's with you? Mom? Dad? Pop in the window here. And we would discuss that kind of thing. So absolutely, that was true in the younger ones, especially with the STAR. The STAR reading assessment is a computer-based assessment that's computer adaptive. It starts at a grade level. As the student answers questions correctly, it gets harder. As they miss questions, it gets easier, and it levels out. I observed a first grade classroom where after the kids were all gone, I stayed on and talked to the teacher, and then one of the dads popped in and said, I have to tell you, that was the hardest test my daughter's ever been given. I had to read everything to her. You know, we had those situations, absolutely. But then on the other hand, I tested a gifted child, and the mom said to me, his school, the words he was getting were so difficult, I couldn't even read them. And I said, did you help him? No, she didn't. But he was a second grade student reading at a 9th grade level. So there's pockets of good, and there's pockets that weren't. Our teachers were adamant in the younger grades to say, hey, Renee, can you delete this test? I know it's not a valid test for this student. Okay, so that was a STAR. As we went on to Granite and we got into Mile High, a lot of Granite said, our kids aren't doing well online, we don't feel this is accurate, we want to wait till we come back. So they waited until they came back. Mile High, the same thing. They did at home with the understanding that you have to look at the variables. You can't just take it at face value on the surface and make a judgment call based on that data. And I think that was true of the high school as well. As Marty had mentioned, you know, there's kids that are la la la, but there's also kids who don't have to sit next to somebody in a classroom and take a test and don't have the peer pressure, who did really well. So we really had a lot of variance this year.
Yeah, for sure. And
Just a quick thought based on that. I mean, this conversation may trigger, okay, so what interventions then kick into place? Another presentation in the future in terms of what all tools we have for intervention. So, and that's not just in the classroom, as you mentioned. It's Title I, it's gifted, it's special ed, it's interventionists, and so that might be a future presentation, and maybe we can make some of those suggestions at the board retreat too. But yeah.
Good? All right, any more questions before we move on? Yes?
When does the parent get access to the data that you have made decisions on or that you have observed? At what point in the school year, normal school year or abnormal, when do they get that access?
So parents have access to the state scores through state reports that are mailed directly to them or provided for them when they come back to school in the fall, because that all happens over the summer for those. For the Galileo assessments, I don't know that we actually have provided the scores to parents for the Galileo in and of itself. For the STAR, there are parent reports that, depending on the school, the teacher, they can print that parent report and provide that. And I know a lot of the data is provided during the parent-teacher conference meetings to parents. That's what I'm aware of for sure. I don't know if any of you may know other times.
No, you've
Covered?
got it. Galileo is used primarily for instructional purposes, and so it's, I mean, parents can certainly look at it. Kiddos look at their own scores as well. It's just teachers use it to look at what standards do I need to focus on for the rest of the year? And so it's,
Right.
like Renee said, you're testing the whole grade level standards, and so mid-year, that data may not look that great, but they might be right on track. They just haven't been taught those other standards. So it's not something we've given to parents because it's primarily a teacher tool.
Well, it takes training to interpret it, for one.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, PUSD is not the only district to use Galileo. It's widely used across the nation and across the state and even in the county here. So that's something we can look into to see if there's a parent-friendly report. But, and certainly when people ask, we give it to them.
So I'm glad you mentioned it. If there's no other questions, we'll go on to a little Galileo data. Speaking specifically with math. So on the next slide, recently I was asked to put together a whole bunch of data with a comparison with our CBAS Galileo, which would be from the current year to last year, mid-year. So it's a comparison of the 2 years. And so this was the data that was released to the public to take a look at. So of course, I think when most people look at things, like I mentioned in the beginning, we look at the surface, and so we look, Sarah, at proficiency. And so the first thing you look at in this data, knowing that it's mid-year, students have not been taught all of the standards within these classes at this point. Understanding that, this is the percentage, in parentheses is the number of students, here's the total number of students in here. So as we look at this, it's scary. It's scary to think that our students are only, right now, you know, basically, what do we have, 21.4% proficient in our Algebra 1 class, midway through the year. So if we look at it on the surface, that is one way to look at it and to say, okay, let's take a look at it. But it's really important to look at the variables and why is it that way, not just to look at what is a proficient, oh, this isn't good enough, or oh, this is awesome. So on the next slide, I want to break down, this is perfect on this one. This is good right here, yeah. So one thing that we do as a district and encourage the teachers to do, don't just focus on the proficiency, but focus on the minimally proficient, because that's just as important. All of our student scores are important. On the next slide, I broke this down to the minimally and partially proficient with this year's algebra and last year's algebra. So I want you to take a peek at this real quick right here. And when I mentioned in the beginning that we not only look at how students are going to do, we look at our curriculum and instruction. Here's something to know. The high school developed, they adopted a new curriculum, I believe it was in 2019. Previous to that, the curriculum, I am told, was outdated and did not align to the standards. So we've only had a couple years that we are now using a new curriculum. When you look at the scores in here, the comparison of the 24 to the 74, these are two totally different groups of kids, right? So in a sense, it's like a green apple to a red apple. It's not apples to oranges, it is. But these are the differences in here of looking at two kids. So on the next slide, before I mention this, I am going to say here, we can infer, based on this data, our curriculum is doing something to help our minimally proficient and our partially proficient. Because last year, 74% were in the minimally proficient. This year, 24% are. 18% in minimally proficient. 54 is a high number for partially proficient, but most importantly, they're moving up. They're moving toward proficiency. So we can infer that instruction and curriculum appear to be working based on this data. In the next example down here, I took last year's algebra students are most likely this year's geometry students. So when we look at that data, last year our algebra students were at 74.1% minimally proficient. However, this year, they are at 60, one more click. Basically, the same students are at 66 in the partially proficient. It is a different content. It's algebra and geometry. But the fact is, these students, they're not going to do well in geometry if they didn't know their algebra. So we really can infer, looking at this data, instead of just looking at the surface of proficiency, that our curriculum appears to be working and helping our lowest achievers. On the next slide, here's another Did we back up one thing? Oh, I'm sorry. This is good. This is good. Sorry. Not having that clicker a sec. So what we do is we take that data, we look at the surface, and then we dig deeper, and we say, what is it really telling us? You know, what are the variables? What's happening? Here's what we found out. There's a high teacher turnover in math at the high school the last couple of years. That's a fact. The curriculum was a problem a couple years ago. Another issue based on data is that we had adopted a new curriculum called MVP. And then finally, here's what we continue to do with our students. We didn't just stop looking at the old data, but we continue to support our students with targeted instruction. We use the Galileo data to see the skills that they're lacking, skills that they need, and teach according to that. We've improved test efficacy at the high school. It was a problem. People were like, oh well, the district says we have to take a test, let's take it. I really think that has changed. The whole mindset has changed recently. And we support teachers in numerous ways along the way. And the next slide. I want to show you another aha moment. This was my aha when I came in. When I first came to the district, I thought, well, we have to look at the state data. It's important. Looking at the data, what is the first thing that jumps out at you? Any takers?
The high number of minimally proficient.
High number of minimally proficient. Absolutely. That's a lot. Anything else?
Low number of percent passed.
Yeah.
In
Look at 16 and 17.
Yeah.
8% of our kids passed the state test at the end of the year, the summative test. That's scary. That's really, really scary. So the next slide, or I'm sorry, the next click. So we also didn't stop there because we know math spirals, right? If you don't learn concepts in the young age, it spirals and you're not going to get it. So we looked at 7th grade. It really wasn't happening in 7th grade. They were slowly getting better. Junior high is a tough age. However, you know, that wasn't happening. So 2 more clicks, Sarah. Here's something we discovered. In 2016 and 2017, this data did not include students who were enrolled in our advanced sections of math. We have geometry and we have algebra taught at Mile High. But those students, none of their data is showing in these statistics right here from the state. So, next slide. What do we do about it? First of all, at Mile High, we said, we got to examine these AZ merit scores. We looked at historical data beyond this, and we discovered the students tested. So, good or bad, a decision was made because apparently there was a thought that they were only allowed to take 1 test. And what was given by the state was the end of course assessment. So our 8th graders were taking the algebra and they were taking the geometry, but they didn't take the grade 8 grade level test. So the following year, we had them take the grade 8 level test. And that is specifically why our data went up. I think to 34 it was. It went up from 8 to like 34. That was one of the reasons in it. But Mile High didn't stop there. They didn't just say, oh, we're going to test our kids more. Thank goodness the state has gotten rid of the end of the course assessment, so we don't even have to worry about that anymore. They only have 3 to 8 grade level assessments now. But the next thing that they did was they reviewed the curriculum through collaboration of the administrators, of master teachers on committees, of all teachers and input in there. They have adopted a new curriculum in 2018-19, which is Engage New York. And that's also our K through 6. So now we are building a common curriculum that builds upon the skills, and we're seeing more consistency across the district. And finally, provided support. I'm not going to spoil the alert, give you a little spoiler alert for Mile High. They have got some really good things planned right now of what they have going on. They have extended data review meetings. They have additional time. They actually have homerooms where they focus solely on math. They targeted groups of kids who were not the low end, who were getting a lot of extra intervention, not the high end that were doing good, but they targeted a group of kids who were like our bubble kids, our kids in the middle that could go either way. And they offered them extra assistance through homerooms, through after-school programs, professional development. And my understanding, it was a board approved to come up with an idea, we need to help Mile High, that you allowed an instructional math coach to be to become a real thing this year. And Jolie Tickner is doing an awesome job. I talked to her today, and she's so excited about some plans of action. And so Mile High actually has some more things coming in. But mainly, what I want to share with you about Mile High is that they are really targeting their interventions, and they're targeting the skills that kids need in there. All right, yes?
Question. This is a, question that refers to all the times that you mentioned the interventions. I know there are various kinds for various people, but what does that actually consist of? Let's pick a ninth grader, okay? What type of intervention would that child get in math?
So I don't know that I've come prepared to talk about the interventions with the schools
No,
because I don't
know.
directly with them.
I know.
I don't know if anybody else would like to share help in that question, or as Mr. Howard said, it's something we can definitely pursue to come. But
I just
any
wondered
thoughts?
because I know about RTI.
Yeah.
And I think most people know about RTI. But I guess the decision to initiate an intervention, is that initial information that they started with? I mean, that they, do they have a place to go for that? Is it a person? Is it a
Are
new
you speaking of
strategy?
students?
Yeah.
Like students have a place to go for that.
Okay.
Is that-
Yeah,
So
I would say it's extensive, and that's kind of what I was
It's-
saying to Andy. Be a great presentation later on down the line. I mean, Prescott High School's done a ton of things over the years, including by identifying students by some of these different assessments, creating a certain class just to support them in addition to their math class. So there's lots and lots of interventions, and there's probably several people in the room that could speak specifically to, say, ninth grade. But I would say we should probably look at that as a future presentation, because it's an extensive subject.
Okay.
This is the start of it. This is the identifier, and then it just kicks in this whole system that we have in place. And you're right, RTI is a big piece of that, and that helps identify. The more severe, are we looking at a special ed piece? The higher performing kids, are we looking at putting them in a different level, or the AP courses and that type of thing? And we do identify all of those levels as we look at these test scores. So
We are also scheduled to cover the student achievement section of our strategic plan in June. And I think we would do well to really dig some deeper into some of this information then.
And that's what we hope come out of presentations like this. Well, and I'll just go back to this one right here. This was a governing board looking at these math scores and saying, what's going on at Mile High? And saying, well, what can we do as a governing body? And y'all told us to put some staffing into it, and we've done that, and it's helped. So that's kind of how the whole process works together. But yeah, I'm taking notes, hopefully you are too, about how we can do follow-up and give you detail that is appropriate for the board level.
Okay, thank you.
And RTI stands for Response to Intervention.
Thank you, Marty. It's extensive topic, as well.
Yeah, and it's multi-layered. You'll find a lot with that. So I'm going to give you just a quick snapshot of the ELA that we have going on here. And again, just like interventions, the use of data is really multi-layered and many. So I wanted to just give you a quick little snapshot. And on the next slide, I'd like to share with you. Go ahead and click. So 3 clicks. We looked at the AZ merit data as well for ELA. We looked across the board at all grade levels. And next. And the bottom line of what we found out is, like, we have lots of data, but really what we need to do to make change is we have to know why it looks the way it does, and what are the details, because the details are really what's going to tell us what we need to do to help students. So on the next slide, looking at the ELA grade 3, and I believe this was 20, well, it's the historical in here. So again, go ahead and click, Sarah, too, thank you. So what we notice in ELA and kind of across the board, we notice that our scores are generally higher than the state. And we do look at a comparison, because how are we doing in the state? How are we doing to HUSD, to Chino Valley? You know, those kind of things. We do kind of have to get an idea of how we compare in here. So you'll notice in here, 50, 54, 62, doing well. Move on to the next one. So when you look at the data of this third grade historical data, AZ Merit, and click, here's what we do notice. Our highly proficient students, they are awesome. Teachers are really pushing them. They're moving along. We went from 15 to 25. So our highly proficient students are getting their needs met, but we don't stop there. So in the next one, I want to show you, go ahead, one more click. We go back to the minimally proficient and the partially proficient. And so my understanding when I came in, they had looked at it a little bit. My first year, I know we looked a lot at this. And what we noticed is in third grade, it's very stagnant. We're not moving kids. We're meeting the needs of our high achievers and our proficient achievers. Sorry about that, slow down. But we're not meeting the needs of these students. We're not moving them forward. So on the next screen. So in, I believe it was 2016, a grant came about, and it was called, Arizona Reads Now, thank you. The Arizona Reads Now grant came about. And for 4 years, a person by the name of Denise Murphy came to our system. And hopefully you've met Denise. She is just ecstatic about early literacy, and she's great in research and knows so much about it. And so I had the opportunity to work with her. And her goal was to dig deeper into the data with early literacy. Why are we getting these scores that we are? And one of the, before STAR, we used dibbles. I chose this slide because I like visuals. And I think charts and pie charts, they can really show us things quick. And it's fun to look at them, and you can easily make a judgment, wow, the majority of our kids are in green. They're doing really good. But when you actually look, Sarah, at it, this is the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. 29% of our students, Sarah, are likely to need strategic support or intensive support. The core curriculum alone is not helping those students. But this didn't start for early literacy in third grade. And we knew that because like math spirals, early literacy, if they don't have those foundational skills, they're not going to do well. They're going to continue to be struggling readers. And this came from Denise, all the research. So it was quite fun working with her because we dug into more data. And on the next slide, what I want to show you, go ahead and click one more. This is the same data, except for this is 1 year, 18-19. Benchmark 1, 2, and 3, and you see the percentages. So we look at the composite score, which is a combination of all the little dibbles tests in here. And again, when we look at kindergarten, wow, 70% by the end, awesome. 56, a little lower in first grade. What's going on in here? So what we did was, we did what Denise advised and said, let's look at the phoneme segmentation. Through research, it is shown that students need that strong foundational base to be able to be good readers, and specifically phoneme or phonemic awareness. And so when we looked at that data, Dibbles only measured it in the benchmark 2 and 3, and you notice right in here, kindergarten not too bad, but they only measured it in benchmark 1 in first grade, and here we have 48% of our kids low. So that was a key point of something to look at. So we continue to look at data. Denise spent a lot of time working in classrooms, talking to teachers, talking to principals. I know the administrative staff spent time talking about this and what the needs were. And as a result, Sarah, thank you. As a result of a lot of our data analysis within the district and the Arizona Reads Now grant, and what that forced us to do to really look into the early literacy, the supplemental curriculum was brought in through the grant. And the early literacy framework, Kelly, was that this year adopted? Is this the first year for it? First year. Okay, the early literacy framework was adopted, and that is, it was created, according to Denise, to build a consistency and continuity among grade levels and school sites. So they structured a literacy program with, I believe, the minutes of time that is spent on phonemic awareness and the early literacy needs in the K2 grade levels. So I say this because we look at third grade, you know, that's when our big state test is, but the reality is that's not where all the learning takes place. It's all that foundation. And so as a district, that's what we're working on right now. We're looking at the foundation. And in the next clip, continued support with teachers. Awesome. Another decision, my understanding is, by the board was to actually hire Denise as our early literacy coach. So this year, she is working like crazy in our elementaries and getting everybody on board and helping teachers understand and looking at the data and meeting the kids' needs at the elementary level. And finally, I believe it was last week, our K-4 curriculum committee, which is made of administrators and master teachers, they grouped together, reviewed some curriculum, and they are recommending Into Reading as our curriculum for K-4 right now. So to me, that's very exciting of what's going on. We can't wait till they get to high school to say, oh my gosh, they're not passing. We have to look from where it starts and to really dig into the details to move them forward. So finally, one more. When reviewing data, I think there's really two important things that are so important. Number one is to recognize that there are variables that affect the data. Not just look at it at the surface level. You know, there's lots of variables. It doesn't mean ignore the scores that aren't high, but understand why they might be that way. And finally, it's really important to acknowledge the surface view of where they're at and to use the microscopic view to find information that you can actually use to create change in the classroom and then act upon it. So, any other questions?
I just have one. After all of this data and analysis, are we using this testing at all to determine if kids are held back? Or is that solely a teacher recommendation?
Some legalities around it would move at third grade would move on with reading. It's about 7 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. And so that does drive some of that. That gets complicated with special education and things like that. But in terms of holding students back, yeah, that's a big, as you know, discussion with the classroom teacher, with the principal, with the parents, and really taking a hard look at a lot of things, social, emotional, you know, the whole piece of how we can keep that kiddo moving. How much support we can give them, is there a special ed piece? But yeah, those are individual discussions, I think, like you said.
And with Move On with Reading, we've never had a kiddo score, well, I take that back. We've had a couple students score below the Move On when Reading benchmark. However, they were students with special needs, and there's an exemption in place for those students. So we've never retained a third grade students due to the Move On when Reading legal requirement. We've never had a student score low enough that we would have to do that. And there are some other remediation measures we can do with that student if we need to kind of help go ahead and pass them.
But it's a decision that has extremely a lot of variables. At the elementary school level, we use something called the Lights Retention Scale. And it measures like 37 different variables that you need to take into consideration, from academic to age to even student size, to make that decision. And it is a collaborative decision with the parents, and you know, it's the last thing that they hear about it, and actually they're, by law, they have to hear about you know, the possibility before, I think it's February 1st. So data is one thing.
Yeah, it just seems like if everyone is reading well enough at third grade, then they should have that. Then why are they continually getting worse as they get older? I'm just confused. Maybe we, okay.
There's a
Enough
lot
said.
of social emotional considerations when retaining a student, as you can imagine. That
Oh, I know, and there's,
Yeah.
but do we if parents want to retain their kids, are we allowing them or not?
It's rare, and in my own experience, those are typically the times that we have. And sometimes that goes well, and sometimes it doesn't. So,
Okay.
but definitely a national discussion as well. Yeah.
Renee, thank you so much for your thorough explanation.
Thank you for having me, and I appreciate being able to share some things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on our agenda is the Auditor General's report. Joe?
Yeah, Brian Moore's going to dig into this.
All right.
This is probably something that's more familiar to board members and many people. It really gives you a good picture of how PUSD compares to peer districts. It's a very intensive auditing piece. Really kind of shows you what kind of accountability school districts have. There's a lot of legislation that drives this particular piece over the years, and it's been changed. Sometimes that's political, sometimes not. But it's a good comparison. All public schools do this except for charter schools. And so, but this is a good comparison for us to take a look at how we compare to others. In years past, there have been some areas that have been big concerns to us, and we've worked on those in the past. And again, it's a big, huge piece of data, and it's comparison data. But Brian Moore, to lighten the conversation, when I hired him, I said, "Do you know about the Auditor General report?" And he said, "No." And I said, "It's your evaluation." And so, all joking aside, these are numbers that Brian looks at, and we talk about a lot about where we're at and how we can do better and that type of thing. And some of them are teacher salaries, and some of them are testing. And so, it's a very extensive look at what we have here today. So.
Yeah, so to just kind of give you a background of how the report is generated in itself, there's 207 districts in Arizona that after they're done with their annual financial report, which the governing board approves in October, we then have to submit our accounting file to the Auditor General. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of lines of coding they analyze, and they break it, and they end up using it to generate our classroom spending report. Now, they've been doing this and actually online. The spending reports go back all the way to 2002. I don't know if they did this even before that, but I think that was the first year. And just kind of a side note, charter schools don't have to worry about this. Yes,
Just
Mr. Mackin.
To pause right there real quick, is there any movement on Arizona looking to do that, to make charter schools be audited? Or I'm just curious.
They are
accountable.
They are audited, and they do have to have an independent audit every year, but the rules and regulations that they have to follow is different. And this analyzing is one piece they don't have to go through. Procurement rules are a different set of rules for them.
Yeah.
So I think you talk to any superintendent of a public district or CFO, and it was absolutely, it's tax dollars that are driving those school districts, why they have to have the same.
But I would say there's not a movement, although I spent probably 5 years sounding like a broken record to every legislator I met, just to say, could you audit charter schools the same way as us? Could we compare them the same way as us? But I didn't have any luck with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they analyze it to the point where they look at previous year to current year variances. I give them that audit file or the accounting file, and I'll get 10 phone calls from my assigned auditor general representative going, "Hey, you went up or down 5% in this line area. Why?" I mean, they're looking at that specific at our spending data. But ultimately, this is the report that ends up coming. Stacy Williams is ready to this is what the report looks like, and it's very small, and I have each section broken down in the upcoming slides. But all 207 districts get a report. This came out March 1st. This is for the 1920 school year, and we'll start going through the sections. The top section in itself, I was so happy that I was making this work.
It's not working.
Maybe if you clicked on the screen. Okay, or hit the arrow. So the top portion of the Auditor General's report gives basic district information. First of all, we are put in together with peer groups. For operational data, our peer groups are about same size districts, same size poverty percentages, and that's where all of our spending is compared. I think we have 13 districts across Arizona that they say are our peer groups, and our administrative per pupil costs are going to be compared to those peer groups. And they're going to rank us low to the peer groups or very high to the peer groups. We also, because operational data is one thing, we also get, we have transportation peer groups. And that is about how many miles over a 5-year average we run our buses, and then we're compared to other districts that run similar, so we're not being compared to, you know, Phoenix, rural, urban versus we're more rural. Number of schools, our graduation rate is on here, and this is one of the conversations about having an AOI director and looking at transferring our dropout recovery program to an AOI, because that DRP program affects our graduation rate significantly. Talks about our school size. It does say our change in students over 5 years. We've had a 12% decrease in student population over the last 5 years. Special ed population, ELL population, poverty rate, and free and reduced eligibility, and that's for the districts. It's higher in the elementary. It's based upon parents filling out the free and reduced form and qualifying, and at the elementary level, you know, I think Lincoln was at 50% free and reduced. As a district, we're at 30. So district information, every school has it. Then we get to the pie graph. Now, it breaks it down into two areas, classroom spending and non-classroom spending. There is a lot of talk that says classroom spending, whether it's instructional, student support, or instructional support, all should be in one content. Instructional support is defined essentially activities of interaction in the classroom, core classrooms between student and teacher. This is all coding driven. It's knowing the uniform standard of financial records coding, making sure every expenditure is coded correctly, and then it drives these numbers. Now, student support is activities to assess and improve students' well-being. This includes all of special ed. You would think a special ed teacher would be in the instruction. They're working with the kids. Based on coding, it's not. Speech language pathologists, guidance counselors, academic advisors. Instructional support has to do with instructional planning, assessing, developing, evaluation, the process of learning. All of our professional development, our instructional coaches, all fall in this area. And so if you look, we have 71.1% of our money goes to that area. Then it breaks it down to non-classroom spending, administration, plant, food, and transportation. Those four, we get ranked with our peers. But how do we rank in the classroom spending of those top ones? Next slide. So here's our peer groups. And I clumped all three of the things that affect students' learning throughout the day. And if you notice, we're at 71.1. Compared to our peer groups, PUSD is the highest, significantly, in fact. So, I mean, if you look at our peer groups, Apache Junction, Buckeye, Casa Grande, Catalina Foothills, Cape Creek, some of those you like, how are they our peer groups? Well, that's the Auditor General's way to, they figure that out. But our classroom spending, that instructional, which was 53%, I do believe there's a lot of, if you follow the USFR, our coding really strictly, like special ed, I analyze others' coding, and some things, may slip into the instruction when it should be in the student activity, the student support. But if you clump them all together, Prescott's extremely high when it comes to classroom spending. Any questions on this? Okay, next one. So here's our classroom spending, not in the classroom, but the other operations. Administrative, plant operations, food service, and transportations. And once again, the operational peers developed that way. I talked about that. So if you look at our administration cost per pupil, we're at 815, and compared to our peer group, that is low. We have 63 students per administrative position. Our plant operations is also low when looking at the cost per square foot. So that is how much do we spend on our campuses. That's facilities, upkeep. It's low. We do have larger schools. Our square footage is quite large. So when you divide it by how many students we have, that does come out to be a high cost. Imagine if we still had Miller Valley and or our old district office, it was even higher before we sold those. Food service, it's just our food service total cost, our contract versus how many meals the students eat. We do fall high in that category. We do have a lot of students that choose to bring their own meals. Transportation, we're low in cost per mile. Total transportation divided by how many miles there are. Total transportation divided by how many riders we have. We're in low in both of those. Now I'll break that out to our peer groups just to kind of see where they are, and we'll go through that unless there's any questions pretty quickly. Next one. So if you could look at our administrative costs per pupil, and it's all coding. I can break it down in small group if you want. Function 2300, 2400, 2500, all are administrative coding. You take all of the costs in those codes, divide it how many pupils. We're at $815, and amongst our peers, we are second lowest in administrative costs. Anything on this one? This is an important one to point out when people say we spend too much on administration. And this, Mr. Howard, is how much lower than the national average? What was that study?
I can't remember, Brian. Well, we're the bottom of the nation.
We're bottom of the nation for administrative costs, and in our peer groups, we're bottom of that peer group.
When you say we, you're talking about Arizona is the lowest.
Arizona is the lowest.
And we're coming in at the lowest.
And we're coming in the lowest at comparable districts because we spread our money.
But it's working.
And it's working.
You're
All right.
telling me this may be the most efficient district in the United States of America?
You know,
That's another way to look at it.
It was until we brought HR into that. Oh, we'll talk
oh
about
yeah. So and you know what? I do bring that up. We used to have, retreats where we went other places, and we had retreats as administration. That's administrative costs, and I brought it my first year going because we went there. This is how much it raises our admin per pupil costs. And Mr. Howard said, we're staying in Prescott now.
Got it. Well, and if you know Brian, he came in every day with something like that for about a year. So
A year,
we
yeah.
got it down quick.
So
Well, Brian, I would say you're right. In talking to people in the community over the years, this is one of the hot issues for a lot of people is how much are you spending on administration?
well,
And it's still very misunderstood even in our community, but this piece of paper sets the record.
It's very important.
if I were in one of our peer groups and I saw this and I was in the one that spends almost $1,200 or $1,150 per pupil, I'd be asking why. We're not there. Okay, next one.
The board would be asking.
Yeah, the board's busy. This is that plant operations. It's total cost for our facilities and anything that falls under that coding divided by our square footage. You'll just kind of see where we're at. We were low in that area, and compared to our peer districts, it shows.
Brian, would you say that's remarkable given the age of our buildings compared to these others?
Absolutely, because there are some exceptions, I won't get into the weeds, but when it comes to just our dollars fixing those things, it is remarkable. And it's having an efficient facilities crew that's skilled. Mr. Moody, our facilities director, has dropped in 6-digit numbers the amount we spend on facilities just by having skilled employees that we don't have to contract out to the private sector because it costs more. And it's pretty incredible. All right, next one. You know what? We have a lot of square footage. You divide by the number of kids we have, especially with some decreasing, 12% decrease over the last 5 years. We're not the highest cost per square foot, number of square footage per students, but we're also not
Sound
below.
Hills is struggling.
Yeah.
We can help them. Send Brian down there.
So that's on them. Figure out all the coding issues. Okay, next one. Food service, you know, it really, our food service, we do not lose money on. And that is the most important thing. Our partnership with Sacred Heart, we do not lose money on it. Now, we are at $3.91, but if you look 2 years ago, I believe our food service cost was low. It really is just number of kids eating meals. We have to staff it pretty much the same, and the food costs are pretty much, you know, comparable across the districts. It's just how many meals into the cost. And last year, 1920, we were high.
Out of curiosity, not to get in the weeds, but our collaboration with Sacred Heart, does that just skew our numbers?
No.
Or is it, it's a...
No, I have to give a projected amount of the cost for Sacred Heart, and they back that out of our
Okay.
cost.
So it's not a weird thing that just skews the numbers?
No.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Though we had some things we had to fix in the past with
Yeah.
that.
oh, we definitely, you know, we had fruit cups that were costing us, you know, just the main,
Yeah.
won't go into that.
Brian,
Please don't.
is any of that on the food costs about where we are, you know, compared to the districts that are, there's a lot of Phoenix area districts.
Transportation costs and.
Yeah, transportation costs on food, what it just costs to present food to our students as opposed
You know,
to other districts.
it really, when it comes to our USDA, you know, food costs, we actually only pay freight on that. I just think it happens to sway one way. It's a pendulum. Our food service provides fantastic food.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, last year, the numbers also include fourth quarter, where we didn't have, except for community, you know, food costs. So, like I said, 2 years ago, we were low.
Okay.
Okay, next one. Transportation, we're low in both. And I also can say, 2 years ago, we were high. And we have Kim Barker, our transportation director. She's done a great job. We've actually cut, without losing anything, costs in transportation by 6 figures as well compared to a couple years ago. So, cost per mile, $3 and 31 cents. Okay, next one. Oh, our cost,
Is that the one you said?
this way. I think I mislabeled it at the top. This is cost per rider. It's $1,628, I believe. All right, next one. Then we get into a little bit of a comparison of our district from 19 to 20, peer average and state average in all of the areas. Once again, we saw how we ranked to our peer averages, even though some of them have higher amounts that are spent. You know, when we look at the total percentage of what they spend, we come out at that 71.1 number. State average, you know, we're talking about districts, and you'll see this with salaries. Districts relying on overrides to increase their teacher compensation. You'll see that difference when we see the state average for teacher pay. This is the change in 2015 versus 2020. You'll notice our student support is a 3.6% change, and I can say that was solely based on analyzing the coding and doing it correctly. We weren't coding special ed where we needed to. We were coding it in the instruction. We are now following the coding per law, and that causes some variances. Oh, go back one. We did spend $32,178 on COVID relief monies in last fiscal year. That was our ESSER 1 money. We have now spent all of that money in ESSER 1. Okay, next one. Teacher state averages. We remain just under 6,000. This right here is the state. It includes Proposition 301. This is us including Proposition 301. this is how much we gave teachers in Proposition 301, which is included in this number. Now, just because the governing board in the budget package decided to move all expenses out of Proposition 301, specifically our instructional coaches, and have all that money go to teachers, that will increase that salary for this year by $1,800 approximate dollars, not this year, next year, in the 21-22 school year when we don't have those other expenses. So essentially, by that decision, we moved closer to the state average because I can't say any other districts decided to make that change. Joe, do you have anything you want to share on that?
Well, and it remains to be seen if we're going to see a lot of raises across the state. Maybe not. And we were able to keep status quo, which cost us a lot of money because we lost the override. But once again, we're going to see when the dust settles and how many students return in August, and we'll be having lots of conversation with the board with that data. And if that's going to generate some funding, do we look at these salaries? But for me, more and more as a superintendent, it's becoming a responsibility piece for us to focus on that piece of getting to the state average one way or another before we're done with this thing.
Like Mr. Howard said, we weren't able to give raises, but we also we didn't decrease pay because essentially we lost revenue with the override not passing. So while our number next year will go up by 1,800, a district that gave a raise, they just closed, our gain was lost.
But what a great tool to help us see where we're at and see where we need to be focusing.
Breaks down number of students per teacher, average years of experience, percentage of teachers in the first 3 years of their, and 1920 looked great. All right, next one. I think it's the last one.
That's the last one.
So that's that last section in the lower right-hand corner. Every district gets to have this done. It's very interesting if you ever want to dive into 207 reports. And they used to have financial at-risk on this report as well. They have since pulled that. Prescott did have areas that we were financially at risk, our capital reserves, our student decrease, and when they put that separate report out in December, I think there was 7 areas of at-risk, and we didn't fall in any of them, so that was good.
Something else that has previously been on the report and is not on it this year because we didn't take the AZ merits last year is a chart showing how many students passed the AC merit. And I mean, while you would like the numbers to be higher, the last several years when I've looked at those charts, the state has been at one level, the peer group has been higher than that, and PUSD has generally been higher than the peer group.
Almost in every case.
I am assuming that will be on next year's report again.
Yeah, they put in that variation from 2015, the one where we jumped 5% in the student support. They replaced that aspect with that. I don't know if that'll stay or not.
I hope they'll do it again.
So that's the Auditor General's report. I mean, so much more exciting than Renee's presentation.
I don't know about that.
Can we get a copy of it?
Absolutely.
It's on, you can get it online.
Board book?
No,
no.
online. Just.
I'll attach it to a board
Auditor
report.
General's
okay.
report.
Sounds good.
Then I'll attach that to a board report. I want to attach all these presentations to the board report. I mean, they might be things that you want to dig into further.
But yeah, you can always get,
Okay.
you can get everything.
Any other questions?
State.
That was my evaluation, and obviously I'm still here, so I didn't fail.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, I would also point out with the AZ merit, just a reminder that even though we are taking the test this year, the state has determined that given the whole COVID issue and all that's gone on, there will be no letter grades given to schools this year because they don't feel that would be appropriate in these circumstances, so.
Good point.
Okay, moving on to the summary of current events. Joe?
Okay, I've got a few things for you, briefly. I don't know if I have the authority to do so, but I'd like to dedicate the board meeting to Sarah Torres as it's her birthday this evening. So, happy birthday. And she's got a twin sister that has a birthday as well.
She's spending it with us.
I am.
Yes, which we're thrilled about, Sarah. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
In the upcoming personnel report that you'll be looking at, we are recommending Clark Tenney to be the new Director of HR and Special Projects, and we're very excited about that. There's some domino effects in place with that, and so, and Krista Simmons is leaving April 30th. That's her retirement date, so we needed to move fast. We've got Clark transitioning, and we've asked Adam Neely to take his position at Prescott High School. He's been very involved with that staff, and so we're very excited. That's an interim piece, and the high school has said to me, well, let's do a process and do a hiring process to finalize that and take a look at other candidates, because that domino effect, if Adam stays in that position or he's hired in that position, he's got an important coaching position that needs to be hired. Sometimes that'll take a teacher out of the classroom, so we need to move quickly on that. So you'll be seeing. I'll keep you posted on that process. But we're very excited to have Clark on the district admin team. He's already met with us a few times and helped us figure out this transition. And he's here tonight in that capacity after the personnel report, if so approved, but not yet. A quick update on PHS graduation. We're on track for May 28th. To have what we hope to be as traditional as possible, as the sun sets over Thumb Butte at Bill Shepherd Field at Prescott High School. We will honor CDC recommendations for the time. It's likely that masks will be still there. The governor's executive order, as far as we know, does not expire until the school year's out. And then we'll have to look at audience and make some decisions there. But we're going to make that as normal as possible and as safe as possible. So we're very excited about that. Of course, our seniors and their families have been updated on that throughout the year, and they get real-time information on that. So I just have we've all been wondering about spring break camp. It went extremely well, and so I just have a very quick slideshow for you just to show you some images and just tell you some of the brief information about that. But it went very well. It's the first time we ever did it. Just some details on that. Michelle Hoop was our coordinator. Boy, she's been with us 20 plus years. She's over at Mile High as a counselor over there. She just did a great job with that, leading that. And we had K through 8 students, almost 300 students, and we probably could have had more. I mean, this was, this is something we put together first time this year and got all the staff we could, and so we had the capacity for around 300. In the mornings, we did academic support. In the afternoon, we did clubs, and you can see a list there. You'll see some pictures of some really cool things that we did there. We did provide transportation, food service, breakfast, lunch, and snacks. And then we also had a nurse, a character coach, and special education services in place. So a lot. It mirrored summer school, but it was quick, and it was fun, and we had great interest in it. So a couple pictures for you. Here's our stretch class. It was over to Baya Judd, as we said. And so you'll recognize some of these students in the rooms. Recess was a hit, as always, so we've got 2 slides on that. Next one. So lots of fun out there, and we still have masks, but there are some mask breaks at recess and that type of thing. Academics, again, was happening all morning long, and then we did the club-type atmosphere afterwards, but that's what the classroom looked like while the kiddos were working. That's our art classroom at Abaya Judd, and we put it to work, and the kids had a great time with that. And then we had building stations, which was a huge hit.
This is a popular one.
Yeah, very popular one. And there's another slide on that, just to show you. Lots of happy kiddos, and we've got those masks on, but we talk about smiling eyes. You see a lot of smiling eyes. Field hockey was a big hit. They were outside having a great time with that. And this is stuff that you'll see at our schools during the week, during PE also. But this was fun during spring break. And then Nature Club, you've heard a lot about our partnership. And gosh, we should have a presentation on this sometime in the near future with the Community Nature Center. The city's highly involved in that. They own that. They have just really opened their doors to us for our childcare during COVID, And during regular classroom, we've got kids out there all the time doing hands-on science. And then once again for spring break, here we were with our kiddos in the Nature Club. I think we have one final slide with that. And you'll be hearing more about the capacity we're expanding at Granite Mountain and Mile High to be able to get kids outside into outdoor classrooms and really take advantage of those partnerships and our natural terrain. So it was a great spring break camp. And Deb, that's what I have for tonight.
Great, thank you. Anybody have anything else for current events?
I have a few things I want to share.
There.
The Prescott High School Interact Club is collaborating with Bradshaw's Interact Club, and they're doing a canned food drive in like the week before prom, and it's for the local food bank. So I just wanted to mention that because that's really helpful, especially during COVID. And then Prescott High School S Club is working on Operation Christmas Child, which is them decorating and packaging presents that are going to be sent to international families that can't afford gifts. And so we're starting that really early this year because there's so much that has to be done for that. And then I just also wanted to mention that prom tickets are currently being sold, which is pretty exciting for all the seniors and juniors. And I'm really glad that we're going to be able to have that this year because it was definitely up in the air for a while.
Sounds like you guys are busy over there.
Exciting.
Anything else?
I have something.
Andy?
So on Thursday of last week, I was able to visit the Abaya Judd School and talk to Stephanie Hillig and meet some of the students and see what they were doing over there. It was a great afternoon. Was able to go in the lunchroom with them and see the kids sitting at their assigned stations in the lunchroom and get out, and a lot of smiling eyes that you see through the masks. And great student interactions. Kids come up and talk to you, and they're waving to you, and they're really happy to be there. That was the main thing I think that I got out of it, was just the happipiness of the kids to be there, and the teachers, and the love that I noticed between the kids and the teachers. Some of the things I was really impressed with was the classrooms and the innovation that the teachers are doing in Abaya Judd, and the different ways that in the same grade level, different teachers are taking their students and really trying to meet their needs in whatever way suits those kids best. So I was really impressed with that. And the playground, I was there actually right after lunch, and so out on the playground they have 4 different zones for the kids to play in. And you know that playground at Abaya Judd, that field there is really narrow, and there's really limited space. So what Ms. Hillig was telling me was that, you know, before COVID, when they didn't rotate zones at every recess, that field would get filled up, and they couldn't have all the kids have a chance to get on it. So there were kids that never got a chance really, or rarely got a chance to get out and play on that field. Well, now every student has an opportunity because they rotate zones every day. And so the playground zones may be something that sticks with them through post-COVID as we get to it, because it just gives every kid a chance to get out into the different areas on campus. So I really appreciate her taking the time to walk me around and introduce me to some teachers and get to see what's going on in the classrooms. I was really impressed. It was a really good day. So, thank you, Ms. Hillig.
Terrific. Anything else?
I had something really quick.
Yeah,
Okay.
Clark.
Just come up here. So it's springtime, and that means warmer weather and blossoms and bunnies and standardized testing. So we've started our standardized testing season at all of our schools. I know Lincoln started today, PHS started today. We had about 260 kids take the ACT test for college admission, scholarships and whatnot for free. A lot of great feedback from parents about, thank you so much for this opportunity. This usually costs us $55, and we have to take half of a Saturday and come in, and the state's making that possible, the district's making that possible. So we knocked that out today. We had AZ Sci today. Our 10th graders will be taking 5 standardized tests for AZM2, like we talked about earlier, over the next few weeks, and we're excited to get those scores and see how our kids are doing. Our Galileo scores from mid-year, you probably saw, there were 7 tests that our kids took, and 4 of the 7 were actually higher this year. If you had asked me, how many of those would you predict to be higher this year than last year? I would have said none. Of course none. Pandemic, hello. But 4 of the 7 were actually higher. Our kids and our teachers are really focused. The other piece about that testing that I was really excited about was If you compare it to like a race, Andy's a runner, he's got runners in his family. We want every kid to finish a mile by 10 minutes. The data that we were looking at earlier that Renee was showing us, it looked a little low, and the reason is that's the halfway point. That's the 5-minute mark. How many kids have already finished the mile at the 5-minute point was what that data was showing us. I was ecstatic that we had 33%. We had a parent or two say, wait a minute, only 33% of your kids are proficient. Yeah, halfway during the year. So that data is exciting for us, and we're really excited to see what comes out of standardized testing coming up in addition to blossoms and bunnies in the spring.
Thank you. Anything else?
I'll give kudos to Rachel Chunglo, who is arranging for the AZM2 testing at a separate location for prep students. So those students who are in the long-term distance learning, she has arranged for their testing at the Washington gym. And thank you to Stacy for letting us kind of invade on her playground space. So it's been a juggle this year to figure this all out, of course, but we're making it happen.
Well, great. Thank you, Rachel. Okay. Any more?
Is she on there? Oh, hi, Rachel. I didn't even know you were there.
All right. Moving on to the consent agenda. Does anyone have any questions or comments on any of the items in this consent agenda? I would just like to take a second to thank and congratulate Krista, who will be done at the end of this month, and we appreciate all the work she's done for the district. So, could I get a motion?
No, it's beautiful.
It's great.
It is Prescott.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Let's see. I gotta dig through all my papers here. Okay. We're moving on now to the study and voting session. We have several items on this. The first item is to consider some additional teaching positions using our COVID monies. Joe, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I'll just give it a quick introduction. And I think the board is fairly up to date and kind of have seen this develop over the last few weeks. But, we're hearing a variety of needs from the principals, including strange pockets of enrollment popping up that were unexpected. Obvious things like filling in the gaps from COVID and distance learning, some shortage of substitute teachers. And so, and at the same time, we're starting to see this COVID money come in to support things. And we said, I think that our board's been really good at capitalizing on those COVID monies when we need it. And so we said, goodness, let's use this capacity to get help now. And there's a variety of things that schools are going to use these for, but we put a math intervention sort of focus on it because obviously, math spirals a little differently, and we need to make sure that we're getting that covered. And so we also, another piece to this too was that we wanted to also use it, we're always looking for recruiting tools. Is there a way that we can hire some people that are out there right now and maybe be able to shift them into positions that may open up for next year? And actually give them positions if there are people out there. And the principal said, we think there might be people out there, and we have candidates in the wings that are qualified. And so principals have been working hard on finding those people pending board approval, but we really believe this is going to help us bridge a lot of different gaps right now and help those schools in different ways. So we're excited about this possibility.
And the description indicated that we would see one shared between Abaya Judd and Granite Mountain, one shared between Taylor Hicks and Lincoln, and then one each separately at Prescott High School and Mile High, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
And you said that they have some candidates in mind for these now? So how
Yes.
soon would that be able to begin pending approval?
If the board approved it, those people would start tomorrow.
Tomorrow, okay.
We've had it posted for a little while, and
We've-
Okay.
we do have quite a few applicants interested.
Okay,
And we've done interviews and been clear the whole time that this is pending board approval.
okay,
So,
okay, thanks.
I think it's a great idea and great that the district is taking initiative and being proactive and doing something like this. It's brilliant.
Is there a motion?
I move that we consider approving 4 FTE positions focusing on math intervention and filling in gaps for the remainder of the 2020 and 2021 school year, funded with COVID relief monies as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We have approved those positions. Okay, the next item on our agenda is an additional use of our COVID monies, but this time for a mental health counselor. You want to explain that a little bit?
yes, Deb, right along the same lines that we just talked about there. And obviously, social, emotional, mental needs are a huge piece for PUSD and across the country. I will say, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a district that has already dedicated so much to social, emotional. And we've talked about this a lot in the last few weeks and months, but we've got over $500,000 worth of staff already dedicated to this. But you talk to those staff, those counselors are inundated right now. So I don't know how other districts are handling this. This is a tough demand on folks, but we're in a position where we can, for the rest of the quarter, same as the teachers, add a person to help that capacity there. And I'll just give a preview that in the future we may be bringing you some other ideas of where we feel like we can really make this social emotional piece a priority with maybe even a director piece. That's getting ahead a bit here, but just maybe some foreshadowing for something we could talk about as a board. But right now, this is just capacity of another counselor who can help with this big issue right now.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
So this counselor would work at all of the schools potentially?
Yes, Ann Chavez, our lead social, emotional, mental health counselor, has developed a schedule for this person to help at all of the schools. Our counselors support gen ed students in crises, as well as students with special needs that have it written into their IEP. So this person would help at all levels.
And if there's a candidate in place pending approval, are you looking for someone that has background working with the youngest all the way through high school age kids? Are there specialties that they really need to focus on, or will this allow flexibility to kind of move some others around?
It does. They have one candidate in mind that they're kind of recruiting, who is a youth counselor. But one thing I would say about our counseling group is they're really good about harnessing the strengths of each counselor. Who's best with the little elementary kiddos, who's
Okay.
best with middle school. So if the person they select really is a better fit for older students, they'll do some
Okay,
shifting.
okay.
I have a question, Marty. What is I'm just curious about this. What is the licensing or certification that a mental health counselor needs? Is that, I'm more familiar with a school social worker, school psychologist. So what are the
You know,
requirements?
they're a master's level, so they've finished a master's degree program, and I don't know the name of their specific certification, but it is a counseling certification. I don't know the name of that certificate offhand.
Arizona does have a licensed professional counselor requirement. So to say that you're a counselor, you must have gone through a practicum that's supervised by a doctor,
Okay.
a doctor of counseling.
Okay.
And
Is
we
my understanding of
we
it.
do have some of those practicum students from Prescott College working with us as well, which has been a great benefit to us because we're you know, using, it's kind of like a student teacher, but it's a practicum counselor who we've been using as well. But I don't remember, it is a certified position and it's a master's level position. I just don't remember the name of it offhand.
Maybe the new HR director does, even though he's been 4.5 minutes HR director.
I think they're licensed clinical counselors is the LCC
Okay.
the acronym at the end.
I was joking, but
I have
you
seen
did
that
have it.
acronym. You might be right.
I'm impressed.
Mr.
I'm
Tenney.
impressed.
Okay, any other questions on this? All right, can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve a one-time FTE mental health counselor position focusing on student mental health interventions for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year, funded with COVID relief monies.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve one FTE mental health counselor position focusing on student mental health interventions for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year, funded with COVID relief monies. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, one more voting item. This is something that we've done every year. Do you want to review it for us?
Yeah, it's a neat partnership, and that's really what it's about. It's a partnership with the city. It was a solution to crowding downtown and businesses having a tough time with the courthouse being used for one more thing. Stacy's here from the city with us if we have any direct questions to her, but basically what we're doing is we're asking the board to waive the alcohol policy for that night, on those non-school nights for those events. Those have been successful in this past 6 years, although last year things were canceled. And so it looks like we're making a comeback with that. There's just 2 events this year that are alcohol related. There are several other events that are non-alcohol related that don't need this approval by the board, but this would be approving those events to continue that partnership with the city. There are lots of pieces in there that are supportive of the school district, including an extra fee that we charge for waiving the alcohol fee to support our facilities in the long run.
The city provides insurance for these?
Yeah, they do, and actually they provide management, which in the early discussions of this, we were not willing to do that as a school district in terms of figuring out, you know, all of the intricacies of having a huge event. So the city manages those events, and they actually have a permitting system and the whole piece with that. So they provide insurance, and they get, I think the city has a piece to that, but also whoever's renting does a piece with that too. So it's similar to how we rent facilities, but the city is a really nice added management piece for us. They really do all the background work on this, and we're so grateful for that.
Questions?
And Michelle wanted to make a comment if we could.
Sure.
Sorry about that. Thank you for having me. As far as the insurance is concerned, every event promoter that holds an event at Mile High Middle School provides a separate certificate of liability to the school district, naming the school district as the additional insured. And as Superintendent Howard mentioned, we do provide an event boss from the city that is there to make sure that the smoking issue is
successful and that people see the benefit of, you know, what it brings to the city, and then next year we'll have more events to offer the use of Mile High.
Thank you, Michelle. Questions? Could I get a motion on this?
I make a motion that we consider taking action to temporarily suspend the district's restriction against the presence and consumption of alcohol on district grounds, specifically for Prescott Mile High Middle School football field and track area, for 2 special events as requested by the City of Prescott Recreation Services as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we take action to temporarily suspend the district's restriction against the presence and consumption of alcohol on district grounds, specifically for Prescott Mile High Middle School football field and track area, for 2 special events as requested by the City of Prescott Recreation Services as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right. Well, we're ready to move on to our information and discussion items, and the highlight of the meeting, Brian?
As presented. Need to count the words.
The school budget, board budget summary report is as presented. All right, now we'll take a look at our COVID information for this month. And do you want to approach the minutes?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, let me, we just have a general update from Alexa. We've asked her to be on
Okay,
just to give us
sure.
The latest health and safety and kind of where we're headed with that. And we've done some shifting as CDC shifted, of course, and we're looking at our, large gatherings, and this is one example of that. We worked closely with Alexa to talk about how we could do this safely, and we're trying to figure out how to get all of us 6 feet apart, and she felt like with masks on, we didn't have to be 6 feet apart. So she's been involved with a lot of that. Alexa, you want to just kind of catch us up on where we're at right now?
Sure. Thanks, Joe, and thanks for having me this evening. I thought I'd give you guys a little bit of an update on our metrics, and then maybe a little bit of an update on what I've been up to as we've kind of been shifting into a different phase of COVID. So last week, I'm sure if you've been checking out the AZDHS website, I think right after our last board meeting, they shifted their metrics to match what the CDC had changed as well. So that school's dashboard that we've been following all year now looks a little different. And so they're now just reporting cases per 100,000 and percent positivity for each county. And additionally, another change was instead of looking at the previous 2-week period, we're now just looking at the previous week. So it's changed a little bit. In the last couple weeks, we've seen a little bit of an uptick in our cases per 100,000. We're still well below moderate. And then our percent positivity has kind of bounced up and down just a little bit, but we're still well below 5%. And we're in low transmission for percent positivity. Taking a look at what I think will happen on Thursday, so every Thursday morning at 9 o'clock, those metrics are updated. It looks like our cases per 100,000 will drop back down to about 29 or 30, somewhere in that range. And our percent positivity will probably be about 4%. So that's kind of where our metrics are. I don't think it's uncommon to kind of, as we get that low, to see those numbers kind of bounce up and down. But it seems, for the time being, that we're staying still in a moderate range of transmission with our percent positivity being low. Like Joe said, I've kind of transitioned to been helping with these large gatherings that we tend to have at the end of the year. And so last year, most if not all of them were canceled. But now we're thinking about things like prom, as Art mentioned, and graduation, and field trips, and kind of now that we're back full in person, what can we do and what do we still need to hold off on? So I've been helping student council with prom, still supporting our nurse
We're still handing out masks to families who need it and trying to distribute our health and safety supplies as needed and saving some for summer school as well. So that's kind of an update on my front, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Is prom scheduled for outdoors?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think she heard you.
Not sure.
Alexa, we were just confirming that prom is scheduled for outdoors, and Mr. Tinney confirmed it.
Say that again, pardon you.
Oh, sorry.
We're just confirming that prom is scheduled for outdoors, and Mr. Tenney confirmed it.
Yep, it's going to be an outdoor event out on our football field, and I think it's going to look a little bit different than a normal prom, but I think it's still going to be a lot of fun for those kids.
Any other questions for Alexa? Okay. I know that Arden and I think Emma had said they had some thoughts on this they'd like to share with us.
Yeah, so I just wanted to give everybody an update on like full in-person schooling. There is so much more interaction and engagement in the classes and the hallways.
Can you speak in your microphone?
Yeah, sorry. And it's very exciting to see like everything seems back to normal, like almost, and it just reminds me, I mentioned this in the preparation meeting, but it just reminds me of the first 3 years of high school, and it seems like everything is going really well. So I'm excited that my final quarter of high school gets to be relatively normal for everybody, and that's just some really good news.
I would wholeheartedly agree with everything Arden said, and just add there's been a distinct and dramatic change in the environment, kind of the attitude at school ever since we've gone back full in person, and it's I feel like it's kind of felt like even though obviously we know that one day everything's going to get back to normal, it kind of felt like it never would, especially because we're seniors and our high school career is coming to an end. But now that it has gone back to full in person school, it feels so much better than I ever could have imagined that it would be, and it feels better even than the years previous. Like Arden mentioned, I feel like we're appreciating the little things more, like being in person in our classes, getting to interact with our teachers one-on-one, having classroom discussions and things like that. And then just about prom, I know that there's a few juniors that ordinarily might have gone to prom that aren't as excited about it this year, but the senior class is very excited. Everyone I've talked to is just so happy to have this opportunity and just really excited to have one big get-together for prom this year.
We're excited too for you.
Yeah. I had the chance to wander Prescott High School on the first day they went back to full in person, and it was great fun just to watch the excitement bubble up. Thank you, ladies. Appreciate it. All right. Now.
Yeah, so we wanted to address instructional minutes. There was a question in our community regarding how we handled instructional minutes during COVID time. So we'll take this opportunity to answer for the entire state and a large amount of the nation, but we did some research on that. Double checked the law, talked to the attorney, looked at the governor's executive orders, and then we had probably an hour conversation with all of our principals in the room and said, how did you and are you approaching instructional minutes? How did you instruct teachers to handle that? And so we put together a document, which is part of the board packet, so that's available to the public. But I asked Marty if she would mind just summarizing that briefly and a little bit of our research and how we addressed that.
So you can see up there, for funding purposes, the number of minutes that we're required to have our instructional minutes each year. And there was a question of whether we were meeting those minutes. Those minutes did not change with any of the governor's executive orders. Instructional minutes are basically calculated from the moment the bell rings that school starts to the moment that the bell rings that school ends. So in instructional minutes, lunch is included, recess is included, transition times between classes, as long as that's not more than 7 minutes, is included. Electives are included in that. Student independent work time is included, field trips, presentations, anything that happens in school is included in those instructional minutes. So it makes sense as our teachers shifted to virtual learning that they wouldn't have students stay online to eat lunch or stay online to have recess or transition to different classes. In fact, the research shows that too much screen time can be detrimental. It can cause behavior problems, it can disrupt sleep patterns. There's many reasons, especially the younger the kiddo is, that you wouldn't have a student online for that many hours per day. So what the teachers did, very wisely I would say, is compress their instructional time, their direct instructional time, to a shorter amount of time during the day, knowing that students would still have their recess, still have their lunch, but more than that, have their independent work time. And independent work time includes reading, research, and taking notes, math practice, instrument practice, language practice, all of those things that students do on their own. It doesn't necessarily make sense for a student who has a reading assignment to sit online while they're doing their reading assignment. So teachers really, compress that direct instructional time to a shorter amount of time during virtual learning when the students are online with the teacher, but they had plenty of things that they could do independently that the teacher had assigned, including at the elementary level. Electives were often in the afternoon, and many parents chose not to log in for those electives. Another good reason why we would compress that time is because many families did not have the ability to have their child online all day long. Access to technology, to Wi-Fi, it just didn't make sense for their schedule. So, there's been a question about, did we meet our instructional minutes? And the answer is yes, we did. What we did was compress our teacher direct instruction time to a shorter time, but there was lots of that other activities that students do on their own that they were assigned. And in fact, sometimes when we had concerns that students didn't have anything to do, when we reached out to the teachers were like, oh, you have that group project you need to be working on, you need to be reading this assignment and watching this video and writing a paper on it. So there was just kind of this misperception, I think, that instructional minutes means a teacher standing in front of a room lecturing. When you go to the schools, you see a lot of collaborative time between students, group work, projects, independent time, tutoring time. So just, kind of summarizing that instructional minutes really are all those things that happen in school from start of the day to end of the day. And those things still were available to students during virtual learning. It just looked a little different.
And from a legal standpoint, obviously, we had to have a plan approved by ADE, and then when this question came up in our community, we double-checked and said, you did approve that plan, right? And they said, absolutely. And we spoke to the state superintendent's office to verify that. So, and we spoke at length with our attorney, too, to make sure that we were meeting these legal needs, and no doubt about it. But it was a great discussion for our district leadership team, and a lot of what the piece of paper says and what Marty just said to you would be applied to in-person learning as well. So that's kind of how we approach instructional minutes, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Questions?
Oh, I just have one question. It has really nothing to do with what you guys are talking about. Okay, so 9th through 12th graders have to have 720 hours a year, I'm taking it.
Yes.
So if you do the math, 180 days, that's only 4 hours a day.
Right. So by the way,
why are we here at 6.5?
We go over instructional minutes by a lot.
Yeah, we need time with those kids.
Maybe that 4-day week with Friday as enhancement, we could probably still meet our instructional minutes, right?
Yes, we could. We right now go way over our instructional minutes. And sometimes when we have a severe snow day, we're able to apply for relief from that snow day and not have to make it up. because we have so many extra
Do
instructional
we
minutes.
take out the days, testing days? Are those not instructional?
Those are instructional. The
Those are
only thing that's
instructional.
not instructional is athletics and clubs. Everything else that happens at school are instructional minutes.
Because I know at Mile High, we had to add some time, but we already have extra time. Why in the world did we have to add time that year, Joe?
Well,
Because we don't want to short anybody.
yeah, well,
Giving you a hard time.
some of the most dealing we do with instructional minutes is about how to get buses working and that type of thing. So, I mean, there's a lot to it. But actually, Cara, you'd be interested in this after you left. As a middle school teacher forever, we looked at why do we have way more hours than high school, and it was a really antiquated law. And they finally just changed that.
They did.
We were like, finally. So,
What did they?
yeah.
Okay.
Which does open up the door for a 4-day week once they kind of lowered those middle school instructional minutes. It is doable, and some families
Yeah, I've had
prefer that.
a lot of drive-through business. Like, when are we going to get that 4-day week? When are we going to get that 4-day week? When are we going to get that 4-day week?
And were those all teachers?
No, they were all parents. Parents.
Happy to put
They,
that on a future agenda, maybe when things settle down, when in terms of,
They discovered that they actually like having their children around
Yeah.
every once in a while. So.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Okay,
any
just
other
wanted to throw that
questions?
out there.
We need to probably get back to the
Okay.
topic here. On the instructional hours? Okay. Thank you, Marty.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. The next item is discussion with the district leadership team about site progress in filling instructional gaps caused by our disruptions with COVID. Are we going to
Yeah,
get input from
let me throw it out
staff or-
there a little bit. Let me frame it just real quick. We had great discussion on this as a board at the last board meeting, and we had a document that drove that. That document is again attached to this. But in conversation with Deb Dillon, I said, you know, we spoke for hours with the principals about how they talked about filling in the gaps, not just after COVID or as we've returned, but the minute COVID happened. And the minute we started seeing that we were going to possibly lose some standards, teachers started putting plans together and putting those in place. And I said, Deb, for you or the public to hear these professional leaders, who, by the way, have been with us going on a decade now, this leadership group, they know their stuff, and they've been working really closely with their teachers from day one on this, and I just felt like it was important for the public to hear what they've been doing to fill in the gaps. So we talked about that in district leadership team. We were going to ask Kelly to kind of kick that off and talk about how our curriculum spirals. You know, we don't just hit one topic in 7th grade and never hit it again. It spirals. So Kelly's going to kick off with that, and then we're just going to kind of walk up through the grade levels. I've asked that it be a discussion, and so you're welcome to ask questions when you need to. But we're going to hear from every grade level briefly just about how we've handled this.
Joe always gives away what I'm going to say, so I'm just going to say it again.
I'm a thunder stealer.
Right, so we already have some systems into place before COVID hit, and they've been in place in the 36 years that I've been in the district. And that is that we have curriculum that we spiral our standards. You know, we don't just hit it one time. You have to keep repeating a standard so that kids can actually get it. And our curriculum now is built around this idea. Many curriculums will spiral so that you keep hitting it again and again, and kids can get that practice over and over again. The other thing that's in place, and that has been for years, but we've really upped it up, we've really stepped it up, is that we give our teachers time to collaborate with one another. And what they do in those collaboration meetings is that they look at data. They look at, this is what we planned, this is how the kids did, this is where they're struggling, this is how we're going to reteach. We've been doing this for years, and I'd say that we've done it more this year than any other year because our teachers understood that there were things being missed. So they were always having that conversation is what can we combine? What standards can we leave out right now and hit the really big power standards? So those two things are systematically in place, and they have been for many years as part of our district systems to make sure that we're filling in the gaps. But schools are stepping it up even more because of our current situation, and they're here to tell you about that.
So can we get back to that Zoom screen so we can see faces? And Stacy's going to kick it off with Discovery Gardens. I don't think they can hear me.
Stacy, go ahead. It's really hard to hear you.
Yeah.
Sorry. So definitely some things that have been going on in the preschool is just getting them here and seeing them every day. That's been a big plus. But things that we've been working on during COVID and coming back from the February timeframe was continuing to keep the classes at those lower ratios. We typically would enroll 14 to 17 students in a class, depending on the types of students, the ages of the students. And we try keeping the classes around 12 to 15 at the most in the largest groups. And that is a parapro and a teacher in each classroom working with that smaller group of students. Another thing that preschool teachers are really good at is differentiating. So throughout the lesson plans, just like you see K-12, they were asked to make sure that they had remediation ideas and that they had enrichment ideas, and then also to really focus on the bank of goals that we have for our students with special needs. So all those were added to the different lesson plans. And the way that we got some of the enrichment and remediation was we took data when we started in August. Our little ones didn't get to start right away. And then when they came back in February, took some more data to see where they were at, and that's how the teachers were able to kind of arrange the different things that they were implementing in the classroom. Another thing that the board has talked about a lot tonight is that social emotional. So we did purchase some assessments that are cheap and online and that everybody can use, and it's actually parent-based. And it started out again at the beginning of the year looking at their social emotional stages. It's ASQ. It's about stages and questionnaires that parents can fill out to let the teachers know where they are at home. It might look different at school, but where are those stages at home? And what this does is it gives us risk factors for each of the child stages of development. So looking at August all the way back to February again, we were able to, for the parents that participated, look at the risk factors, whether they were high or low, and in what areas, so that we knew what to support those teachers in the classrooms in. We're very fortunate. We're part of Quality First. It's a grant, and we do have a nice lady. I think a lot of you know Virginia Howard, who comes from Southwest Human Development, and she does have her LPC. She's been working with some of the families and the students, as well as Dr. Dan, who was pulled in to work with some of our special needs students that are moving into kindergarten next year. So those are two nice things that we've hopefully been able to do to support the families, the students, the teachers, and then even as these students move into kindergarten next year. And then the last thing that we did, we've always taken students from the community to do child find, where physicians, other schools, family members refer students in. We started a different way of looking at our students in classrooms. It was grabbing all the therapists, looking at developmental milestones, and working with the teachers to help better identify students that might have developmental concerns. We didn't throw them into the child find gamut once a month. We actually took them as they came into concern with the groups or with the teachers versus the parents came in to see us. So those are just kind of some of the things that we were able to do and are continuing to do for the last 2 months of school. And hopefully, I was telling a group before, I'm seeing really good things. These kids came back and they're doing well. We didn't see a lot of regression. We didn't see through special ed or through just our general education peers. We saw some great things happening. They showed up to their Zoom meetings, a lot of them. They watched the recorded ones. They did the handouts. The packets were dropped off to homes. So there was a lot being done in preschool to hopefully keep the families engaged, the students engaged, and to not lose that educational portion throughout this time.
Is it Stacy? Is it
Yes.
Stacy? Stacy, I have a question. Could you repeat the name of that parent form, the name of the company, or where did you find it online?
So it's the ages and stages questionnaire for social emotional.
ages, okay.
are looking at also getting the ages and stages 3, which goes over all domains. But the one that we started for this year was purchased by, again, Quality First. And I actually have it pulled up online. It's really neat. It focuses on self-regulation, compliance, social communication, adaptive functioning, autonomy, affect, and interaction with people.
Thanks.
Thank you, Stacy. Any other questions?
All right, good evening. Hi again. So as a district, we've been talking about how we're going to fill in the gaps basically all year. We wanted to make sure that we were keeping that at the forefront of everything that we were doing. And from the elementary perspective, I mean, the second that we had kids back, we had teachers really figuring out where the gaps were, what kids knew, what they needed to work on, and we're creating plans. And Ms. Hughes and Ms. Hillig will talk a little bit more about that. But we also really looked at that from a different perspective. We didn't want to just hammer away at those academics. We know how essential those are, and that's the business that we're in, and we know that that is definitely essential. But we knew that life has been very different this last year for everyone, and we really wanted to balance how much we were pushing those academics and interventions with all the other things that make school special and fun. So we knew that social emotional learning was a huge component to that. So we wanted to make sure that we were helping kids with self-regulation, with getting back into a routine, with also their emotional awareness and making sure that they were ready to learn. Another important factor was building relationships with our students. And, from a computer to in person is very different. So that was the focus for all of our teachers and all of our staff, was to make sure that those relationships were solid. But we also really wanted to foster student relationships. We knew that some of them might not have been around other kids basically in a year. We wanted to make sure that we were supporting them as they navigate these new friendships and as they were learning to interact with students and kids their age. Once again, that's essential. But one of the other really important factors is that we know that school is, especially at the elementary grades, it's about fun as well. So we didn't want to lose some of those special opportunities that make school special and memorable for our kids and make them want to come to school every day. So we are really balancing how much we are pushing those academics with all of the other things that are just as important too, especially in the K-4 realm, our little kiddos, to make sure that they love school and want to come to school every day. So I know Ms. Hughes will talk a little bit more about the specifics of what we're doing to fill in those gaps, but I just wanted you guys to know that we really are being very intentional in balancing what it is that we're doing for kids on a daily basis.
Thank you, Kelsey. My name is Karen Hughes, principal at Lincoln. So once we get all those kids back into school in person, we had done some assessing virtually. We did some more assessing once we got them in person, and we did everybody I'll speak to the K-4 schools, but everybody got Galileo. Everybody got maybe some makeup star tests, those ones that Renee was telling you about in the beginning. So we collected data that we had gotten online, data that we had gotten in person. And also, I'd like to echo what Kelly was saying, is we have the systems built. We are definitely an RTIMTSS district. We have worked for a very long time to make sure that we understand those really important components. Figure out where your kids are, figure out what they need, give it to them for 4 to 6 weeks, take some more assessments, figure out where they are, and then figure out where you go from there. So we really had that system built. We kind of had to augment it and see what it looked like for us at this point once we were going in and out of these different formats of learning. So collected a lot of data when we all came back, added it to data teachers already had, and then we all took turns at the elementary level having, as a district, still having might last 4 weeks, might last 6 weeks, might last 2. Teachers are getting so good at those Galileo formative quizzes. They might teach a standard for a week, give a Galileo quiz about that standard on a Friday, and they get instant data. Who's got it? Who needs a little bit more help? What kind of information might I pass on to those interventionists to help them help meet those needs? So we have systems in place. We've just kind of, I don't know, beefed them up a little bit, looked at them a little bit different, and figured out, wow, what if we got to get these kids before they leave us in May? So Mrs. Hill is going to tell you a little bit about those little bit more intensive interventions kind of at a tier 2, tier 3 level.
Thanks, Karen. You and Kelsey have done a great job kind of presenting all of this. So I guess my visual for the board and for anybody out there listening, I want you to think of like a pyramid. And so what Karen really just kind of talked about is the bottom of the foundation of that pyramid. And so that's what we're doing and how we're modifying and adjusting our instruction in the classroom right now. And all of our teachers are working together at grade levels to make sure that we're making that a comprehensive curriculum that is appropriate for our kids in this challenging year. So then when you move up that pyramid, the next level is what we call tier 2. So tier 1 is the general foundation. Tier 2 is smaller groups. And this is where we pull students for intervention, where we can do a push-in, but we're focusing on specific skills. And so this is, like I said, it's more targeted, specific instruction for those kids, and we're using our interventionists for this. So let me give you an example. For example, when we pull these kids, we could be working on short vowel sounds and long vowel sounds. And we would do that each session while we're working with those kids to make sure that they're learning those skills. And Karen did a great job kind of talking about the different tests that we use and the progress monitoring that our teachers and our interventionists are using to track that data. So if the kids are showing growth, that is great, and that's what our whole purpose is in that intervention. And we will continue with having them in that tier 2 intervention as long as they need that targeted support. Once they don't need that anymore, they would just go and receive the tier 1's intervention support. But if something is showing us that that intervention isn't working, then we take it to tier 3, which is that top point of that pyramid. And so tier 3 is very, very small group. It could be like a 1 to 2, 1 to 3, or awesome if we can do a 1 to 1. But this is very, very targeted. So in tier 2, they might be, as I said, talking about short vowel sounds and long vowel sounds. In tier 3, we are just looking at one specific skill, perhaps. So it would be just like working on the short vowel sounds with those students. So just to kind of give you a visual and an example of how those interventions work. So we're progress monitoring our kids all the time. We are using this information in order to put the kids in the right intervention. So I want to publicly thank you for just passing that math interventionist, because this is where we're going to use them. So thank you to the governing board for that tonight, because we really need some help with our math interventions district-wide. Our reading interventionists are also working, but that extra help in the math is going to be great. So thank you for that support there. If the students are showing growth, that is meaning that our interventions are working at any level, tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. If we find out that they're not working at the tier 3, that's when we start having conversations about perhaps doing a little bit more assessing that's more specific and involve perhaps our school psychologists. Right now, a big topic and a big conversation piece is retentions. Are we going to be retaining a whole lot of kids for next year? And really, my answer to that
Thank you, ladies.
Whenever it's my turn to talk, my dog barks. The moment I turned off my microphone, my daughter just walked in the door to dance. So the dog barked. We're done though, I think. Okay, so now that we're past the dog, I'll talk about Granite Mountain. So much like the elementary principals did an awesome and amazing job of studying the foundation and talking about what intervention and what our TI and TSS look like in our schools. And at Granite Mountain, we've had a system set up and in place from the time you became
of different things happening, and I'm excited to kind of see how it plays out for us this quarter into next year.
All right. So at Prescott High School, just focusing on some of the unique elements that we have there, because everything that you've heard all evening is, a lot of time was spent this last year on collaboration, identifying power standards, really translating that to essential skills that students need to move on next year, identifying, we did all that as well. Where it was tricky for, I think, all of us, and take this opportunity to give a lot of thanks and appreciation to all our staffs, all our leadership teams. For us, we've got a third of the district, over a third of the district on our campus, and student body as well as staffing. Bringing 100 people together in a virtual meeting and trying to problem solve was just not effective at all. So every week we would get together with our leadership team and instructional coach, going in and out of virtual classrooms, checking to see how things were going, really assuring that check-ins were taking place to check not only on how kids were progressing academically, but also social and emotionally, and making sure services were being provided for anybody that was struggling. And then every Friday get together with our department chairs, who then in turn would meet with their departments to once again strategize with a wide variety of course options. Our leaders did a phenomenal job. If you look at the intentions that were put in place by our math department to provide not only direct instruction, but independent practice and additional support, but then all of our electives, performing arts and so forth. What's unique on our level is that kids have to meet certain seat hours, which we addressed earlier tonight this meeting, but they have to turn around and earn credits to stay within compliance with the state on graduation. And so that really, we still had to honor those standards by law, but at the same time, we really took that time to say, what are we teaching? Why is it important? How's that going to set these kids up for success? And we're back to the so-called normal instruction again. And so just want to thank all those guys for all the efforts. It was a lot of time, a lot of effort. I know we all didn't have similar structures in place. It was pretty impressive. Because we had those structures in place, when we moved into the fourth quarter, knowing all our students were going to be back on campus, it was pretty fluid. We turned around and we decided together to dedicate our Fridays specifically to enrichment and to intervention. We've done one of those just based on our calendar. We had a lot of success. We gave kids an opportunity to really make up their credits and grades from third quarter. But now we're really pushing forward once again to identify how does enrichment and intervention intertwine with each other. So Fridays are not fun, free days, but they are times for us to turn around and say, hey, we can do some reteaching based on whatever we identify what the gaps were. We can also do some exciting, we've got some departments to come up with some incredible hands-on, exciting, interdisciplinary lessons and so forth, because we also want these kids to come back together, interact with each other. They need that as much as anybody, and our teachers need it too. We're also taking care of the social, emotional challenges that our teachers have actually had throughout this year too. So we're excited about that. We're going to work this week on, starting tomorrow, identifying objectives for every Friday, that every teacher has a objective that's focused on enrichment and another one that's on intervention. And once again, like we said, if we can intertwine those together, that's our goal as we go through this process. Then by the end of the year, we are excited about our summer programs. We've always offered and will continue to offer our credit recovery programs, so our online program. But also we want a hands-on, in-person option for our kids too. So we're starting to share that with our families, where students can take advantage of both if they need to, but if they want to focus in on credit recovery, they have that option to use our PLP program, our online platform, but they can also engage in what was best to describe as expeditionary learning. 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, five weeks, with focuses on a week of English, a week of math, some elective time, and so forth. So we've got a group of teachers together
Thank you all for taking your time. Rachel and Terry?
Rachel, would you like me to go next, or would you like to?
Either way.
I'll go. So, hi everyone, I'm Terry Gorman, I'm the Director of Special Education for the district, and I so appreciate this team of leaders, principals. You did a wonderful job describing what each of your buildings look like in regards to interventions. Special education students are always gen ed students first, right? So all of the interventions that you've heard this team of principals talk about are interventions that are available to all the students with IEPs within our district to address those gaps in regards to core curriculum. What special education does is provide specially designed instruction that allows kiddos to access general education. So during COVID, we were pretty blessed in this district because we have some amazing special ed teachers, and they did not miss a beat in providing specially designed instruction to their kiddos. So our resource students followed whatever model the district was in at the time. So if it was hybrid, they attended 2 days a week. Then on their off days, at home days, school days, they logged in to get their specially designed instruction with their resource teachers. Our students in our self-contained programs attended school 4 days a week, whether we were in hybrid or in distance learning. The only time we did not attend school was if it was a statewide school closure. So we were very intent on making sure that our special education kids who have the most needs and the largest gaps are still continuing to receive their specially designed instruction. They also continue to receive their related services, which are speech language, OT, PT, even adapted PE, and counseling, and they receive those services virtually either through our Thera platform, which the district purchased to provide those remote services, or through Google Meets. So we worked really hard to make sure kiddos were getting that specially designed instruction during our closure. Special education teachers now are of course thrilled. We're thrilled to have our kiddos back in our classrooms. They are receiving specially designed instruction based on the minutes that are delineated within their IEPs. And teachers, special education teachers, like all teachers, are continually monitoring their students' progress and tweaking instruction, changing of instruction if the data indicates that a child is not making the expected progress. And a special education student's rate of progress is much slower, for lack of a better word, than a general education student. So it's important to make sure all students make progress, but because of that lower rate of progress for our SPED kids, their instruction has to be very intense and very targeted. And that happened during COVID, and that will continue to happen now that we're all back in school. Andy did reference the addition of a multi-cap program at Mile High, and that development of that program is still in the developing stages, for lack of a better word. And our hope is to provide services, more services for students who require more services. So resource kiddos who need more time with their special education teacher would be served in that program. Students who require not only more specially designed instruction, but might also need some additional support with their core instruction would be candidates for that program as well. So we keep on trucking away, and we keep on focusing on what's best for our kiddos in special education.
Okay, I think I'm good now. Thank you, Terry, for jumping in. My headphones died on me, so. I'm just going to talk real briefly about prep kiddos, because a lot of the same things we're doing for prep students have already been covered by the principals. But
borrowed her from prep, and she has been servicing the prep students for all 3 elementaries in K4. So we have teachers who are doing the same thing as the in-person elementaries. They are reviewing their data, finding those kids who need that next level intervention, and then they've been referring those kids for reading intervention. Our kids with IEPs are still getting their services through their resource teachers, who's their speech pathologists, OTs, PTs, all through Google Meets, coordinating. Sometimes we have some students who even will come in after school hours to meet with a resource teacher or meet with an OT, and that so that they can be outside of other students being on campus. In addition to that, the biggest thing we've really been kind of pushing with prep kiddos is that we know that distance learning is not the ideal format for most kids. It's really, we're all excited about getting kids back in person. And for some kids, they are self-motivated enough that they can be successful in this format and do well. Some of them, they maybe don't have the supports in place at home, or they just don't have that motivation via Zoom that they would in the classroom. It's a lot easier. When the teacher's coming by and checking on your work, you're going to get your work done a lot sooner than if you know I just submitted by the end of the day. So for those kids who really have been struggling, and this is for K-12, we've really worked with parents, had meetings and conversations about, what are the things that are preventing them from being successful online? Is it something that we can help with? Help with scheduling. I've met with students on a bi-weekly basis to go over, doing these assignments. Have you completed these things? Have you caught up on those assignments that your teachers gave you a chance to catch up on? And we kind of give them this grace period and walk them through we try to help them be successful no matter the format. But ultimately, if we kind of came down to, there's some big gaps here and we don't feel like we'll be able to compete it online. We've had those tough conversations where we, tell the parents this isn't working out, and can we get them back in person, and can we, ease them into it, but we really just need them back in the classroom where a teacher can be there to provide that face-to-face intervention. So for a lot of our prep kiddos, they just need some additional supports, and we're able to stay online, and then those ones that we have had to exit have been successful back in person. So that is really our distance learning kids. They're getting a lot of the same interventions, and hopefully we can get all of them back in person next year and get them any of those gaps that we might be missing, testing them in an online setting, then we can get those filled in next year.
I would like to thank you all for taking your evening to get us caught up. My gosh, you have so much going on. Thank you. Anybody have questions or comments? Okay, thanks. All right, the next item on our agenda is a discussion of something I would like to recommend that we do. Earlier this year, we decided that we were going to each take on a role as a liaison in one or two of the schools. And I visited with the district leadership team a couple weeks ago, and we talked about this. And because of COVID, we really have not had an opportunity to do much with that liaison program. And two of the groups that we had hoped to connect with were staff and parents. The district leadership team recommended that each of us go to the school where we're the liaison for a site council meeting this spring, before the end of the school year. So I'd like to throw that out and see if that's okay with all of you. If you are unable to make it, I will try to get to as many of them as I can. And if you specifically can't get to yours, let me know, and I will plan to attend that one as well. But what you would need to do is to connect with the building principal, where you're the liaison, and find out when they would like to schedule that site council meeting. Site councils are, include both staff and parents. So it is an opportunity to connect with both groups and get us a little further along in that connection process. Any comments?
I think it'd be great. From what I've seen, they're usually afternoons.
They're usually
right?
after school.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, and like I say, if you can't go, let me know, and I'll try to make sure I can get to that one, so. Okay?
Are those, just to ask, would we have a functional role in those meetings? Are we there to listen? I just want to be cautious about getting in the middle of chain of command concerns that the district, the staff may have, or the parents might have, that needs to go to a staff member at the school as opposed to...
The principal will be at that site council meeting, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. The goal I envision, and this is just my envision, my aura, is to focus on our plans going forward. Not spend a lot of time dissecting the past year, but look forward to what we've got coming up. So, okay. The next item ties in with that, is a review of our strategic plan section on community and stakeholder relations. All this kind of is going to dovetail here. So, Joe?
Yeah, and this is our second goal area. We did one last month, and so we have a kind of a similar process. We talked with the principals, got input from them on each of these, and of course the principals are the folks that have dug into this year after year to say, what progress have we made? Where do we need to go with this? Where are we going with this? So district admin team's just going to kind of take quick turns going sort of high view, just pointing out major accomplishments and what we're working on. And then we'll pause between each one. These are target areas, and allow the board to ask questions. So I have the first one. It's communicating vision, mission, and role of staff. So the major accomplishments that we outlined here are really in a lot of this target area with getting our staff to understand and support the vision and mission. Most of those target areas, we are in the accomplished or 5 to 10 year goal range. So we've made lots of progress on this in terms of getting our staff in line with where we're headed and what we believe is a district. That has helped us hugely as a major accomplishment in being able to be fluid and to pivot during times like this last year when things were changed a lot. We had those things in place, and so we were able to use those and the staff's understanding and role to be able to pull together their ideas and work with them as we shifted and then communicate that. Another major goal accomplishment that we said was that we're constantly adapting and adjusting to what our expectations are in response to changes in education in general and the needs of our community and state. So, and then another major accomplishment is that we provide new staff orientation at the beginning of each year, and we start with our vision, mission, and the role that we expect our staff to play. What we're working on currently, we're always working on current ways to communicate our vision and mission with our stakeholders, and this goal area is targeted to help have staff help us understand and leverage that wherever they go, whether that's in the school buildings or in the line at the grocery store. And then also we're working on how do we incorporate that new staff orientation more with classified employees too when we onboard them. We do that very thoroughly with teachers, but not necessarily with classified staff yet. So that's that target area.
Any questions? Next.
All right, I've been asked to go over with you target area 2 from this. I realize we're going into hour 4 of our board meeting, and I don't want any of you to reconsider your plans for seeking re-election in the future, so I will be brief. Major accomplishments you can see up here have to do with really recently our communication around COVID. Our past communication model was largely from schools to parents, and it was rare that the district communicated directly with parents unless there was a snow day or something that was a major district-wide thing that Joe felt, I really need to get the word out to parents. It was the kind of the less is more idea there. As we moved into COVID, we realized we needed to have a unified voice regarding metrics and what we're doing and plans for being in person or not. So we shifted for several months to weekly communications from the district level, and then the nuts and bolts of what was happening at schools coming from principals. We've shifted now back to all the information about PHS is coming from PHS and relatively few district pieces. Another major accomplishment for us this last year was communicating via our websites. As we have been making decisions around COVID, and as an interested parent, I've looked at several other districts' websites for, how are they approaching this? There's almost nothing on most of the district websites I've seen. I love how much information we've got regarding social emotional health and learning, our health and safety pieces. It's just a wealth of information that you can find on our website, in addition to our roadmap, et cetera. If there's a website that has more information for parents about what we're doing day to day in our schools and why we're doing it than Prescott Unified's, I would like to know about it. We're still working on a couple of things, as you can see. One is providing additional clarification for parents. Not too many parents are looking for more information at this point. We've been inundating them with information, but there are some who are misunderstanding. What does this data mean? Why are you taking this approach? And part of what we've been doing in our board meeting tonight is helping clarify those things, isn't it? We're looking for increased opportunities for the board to communicate with our constituents, with our parents. And we talked about some of those things tonight as well, have you not? The liaison pieces and maybe coming to site council meetings and then what we're doing tonight is a part of that. And then the last piece is we need to recommit to talking about the great things that are happening in our schools. That's something that we do through our PR efforts, but it's also something that we can do in board meetings like this and in other venues, and we need to look more at those opportunities. Questions that you've got for me about around this one? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, target area 3 is mine. And target area 3 is really just talking about our major accomplishments, our district accomplishments with that partnership. And, we have accomplished a lot during, the last 12 months. We are continuing to refresh our marketing and commercials to address current times and needs. Our preparation or our preparedness for the technology instructional strategies to address the unplanned distance learning with the Chromebooks, the 500 plus that we gave out, the hotspots, our partnership with the Prescott Education Foundation to provide 36,000 to purchase hotspots for students that don't have internet access at home. The Google Classroom, the professional development that took place, to have that be the platform for our instruction distance learning. Just our roadmap to reopening. That document, I think, was a beacon of decisions that we made as a district and for consideration for the governing board's input. Our distance learning coordinator, our health safety coordinator, those were two things that we paid out of our ESSER funds. There was a lot of collaboration on how these districts were using ESSER funds, and we were one of the few districts that I saw that actually hired full-time staff members to address needs during the pandemic. Just the ongoing changes and needs, the leadership response. Our budget is always something that we're proud of because the budget package that we put forward and our stable budget put us so that we can see how the dust settles next year and rely on our carry forward. And then adding social emotional resources. You approved an extra social emotional counselor for fourth quarter. We already put $500,000 to social emotional staffing for the district, and that was pre-pandemic. We're still working on just triaging. The equipment that we gave out, there was a picture of one that came back in like 18 pieces. And so we will use the funds that we have to replace our fleet of Chromebooks. We also still need to advertise what we're doing for the students that have accelerated and need more challenges. And as Renee said, some of those students have their own challenges when it comes to perfectionism. And then also, a spring break camp and the multiple summers to come. Our beefed up summer school this summer. We have funds to continue that for, a couple of years. And so that's target area 3. And I think Mrs. Reed has target area 4.
No, I don't.
I think Kelly Bradstreet has target area 4.
Kelly had to jump out.
I think Mr. Howard has
Sure.
target area 4.
Feedback from all stakeholders. So site level, for major accomplishments, our site levels are focused on chain of command. That's fully implemented in terms of getting feedback as close as possible to the classroom level. Our site councils are fully developed. Our PTAs, our Education Foundation and booster groups have strong systems of feedback and communication at all levels. Our foundation, I could talk about them all night. They're so far along in terms of supporting us. This governing board liaison, which we talked about tonight, that system is implemented at each school now. Our leadership's involved in many community organizations such as the Chamber, Mr. Tenney, and, oh no, that's me. He's the city council, and then lots of service organizations. And then we had over 10 surveys to our parents and stakeholders in the past year. But what we're focusing on right now is reinstating frequency of these feedback systems. And then also the governing board liaison, possible expansion site councils. Looks like we're going to move forward with that. And then also board discussion at upcoming retreat to look at new ways to gain feedback from stakeholders at the board level as well. So any questions on target area 4, feedback from stakeholders?
I do think, Joe, it's kind of an out there question. What is there a status for the Roost Street Theater within the foundation right now?
Oh, in terms of the Roost Street Theater project?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty on hold. We haven't jumped back on that.
Uh-huh.
And the foundation really is not involved with it. I mean, they had some discussion about being involved with it, but didn't really jump on.
Right.
Kind of where I'm seeing it heading is that as a district, we put a focus onto that. And, we've already got someone who oversees and recruits renters, and we've worked with some of the entertainers in the area to do that, both at Hendricks and Roost Street Theater. But I think we're going to move to an in-house piece with that. The Roost Street Theater project was moving along well, but starting to spin its wheels and backtrack and that type of thing. I think we can do that in-house and get the same product as far as filling that up with venue as a venue with music and arts.
So the emphasis on the community theater concept, musicals, whatever, is off the table. When you say it's going to be in-house, you mean it won't occur there?
No, I think that the district can take on the management of it rather than having a large group with lots and lots of different ideas. And I think we can get it moving if we start where we're at right now and just start bringing venues in and start bringing people into the venues and start having shows.
Oh.
But it's just been put, I mean.
I understand it's not a high priority right now.
Well, it's just been set so far on its heels with nobody being able to entertain, so. Yeah.
Right, okay.
All right.
Now
I have target area 5. I was gone today, and you might notice that I got the longest one. That's right. So that's what happens when you miss a meeting.
Should know better.
I know. This is about developing our community partnerships even further. We've always had wonderful partnerships throughout the community, but this is about developing it further and creating systems for it. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but one that I really want to highlight is our volunteer program. That is a success story. We have a system where volunteers can come in, they can get fingerprinted, they can get assigned to a school. It's a wonderful system that we put in place for over 800 volunteers. Another one I'm going to highlight, because we've talked a lot about it today, and it's hot off the presses. Joe doesn't even know about it, I don't think, is a partnership that we're developing with West Yavapai Guidance Clinic. We reached out to them and said, hey, what can you do to support our families with mental health services? And they said, we have a grant. Guess what? We have a grant. And we can come in and talk to your staff. We can come in, we can do parenting groups to help parents who are struggling with their children at home. And that's another burgeoning partnership that we're developing in that area, which is a great need. And another one I want to highlight, which you'll see more next month, is our AmeriCorps Vista program. And we have, of course, our high school ambassadors who are learning to be teachers. They're working with our teachers to assist students and to potentially go into this career for themselves. They get college credit, they get a scholarship, they get elective credit. That partnership with AmeriCorps Vista, with Arizona Serve, has been tremendous. This is how we got our volunteer coordinator. Now we have an attendance success coordinator in year 2. You'll see Monique next month. She's going to present on the work she's been doing. We have some garden, we have a garden, what's it called? Farm to School coordinator. This is a partnership that really benefits our students and brings programs to our district. The areas that we potentially want to work on, and this is kind of, probably this is why I got it, because this is a passion of mine, is I really want to make sure that we're following through and recognizing and showing gratitude to all of our partners. You know, I don't know if you looked at that donor list of the donations tonight. I mean, there was 20 donations on there just from the Lions and folks that just want to support us. And I worry that we don't recognize them and show gratitude, and that we don't really celebrate the amount of money and the support we get from our community. So that's where I would like to work on in this target area. I don't know who has target 6 because I missed the meeting.
Yeah, but I always say this when I get a chance. You'd be hard pressed to find a community that's more supportive. I mean, I don't know how we do it without all of this support from so many groups. I'm just so grateful. So the final one is education advocacy, and major accomplishments there. We said PEAK, that's Prescott Education Advocacy Council, continued advocacy directly for PUSD. These folks are our champions. We know this. They're out there going to bat directly for us, and have been for many years. We sort of grew up together, I would say. Statewide advocacy groups are supporting PUSD and all districts. Well, and in terms of working on those things, how do we get staff more involved and engaged? And so there's some talk too about, you know, associations, and ours could use some numbers, because there's not much voice if there's no numbers. And so I have, as a superintendent, in a rare move, worked with them in the past to try and get numbers. We haven't had great success with that. We have some new ideas. Educate district leaders and staff on how to engage others. That's been ongoing, but it's been maybe hit and miss, so we could put some more focus into that. Educating with more partner groups like Expect More Arizona. We are official partners with them, and they're doing stuff every day, but I don't know that we're involved with them every day. And then also, this has been an ongoing goal for the board as well, but governing board involvement in legislative advocacy. And ASBA has a great way to help us all be engaged with that as much as we can or would like to. So there's plenty to do there.
Okay, thank you. I know we kind of zipped through all that quickly, and by the end of the meeting, it's kind of hard to get really excited about those things, but I would tell you that those will probably provide a real basis for us for discussion for our retreat. If you will recall, that will be on the morning of April 29th, and what's down for discussion for that retreat is to discuss staff, student, and family feedback, What feedback do we want from staff, students, and families? What and how to communicate with the public? What are our communication protocols? How to tell our community of our needs and struggles as well as our successes? What does the community expect and want? And how to gather community feedback and ways for the board to be in contact with the community. So we really are going right back into this stuff, and those liaison opportunities with the site council will tie right in with that as well. So that's coming up on our April 29th retreat. I would suggest that if any of you have specific items you would like to see on the agenda for that retreat, if you would send those either to me or to Joe, then we can make sure we get those things on that agenda. You can certainly contribute to that agenda. Anybody have any other future agenda items for board meetings?
Maybe one I'll just throw out with a little hesitation that it could open a can of worms, but Mr. Cordes is retiring, and for that matter, Krista, and I don't know if we want to do this on an annual event, but it seems like a May board meeting would be a great time for brief, if possible, like a brief moment or presentation for, Kelly Cordes to get up and just share what his career has been like here, or Krista, or, and I don't know if we give criteria to it. So we do the, and every year somebody's retiring that's been here for a year and a half. Great, but I don't, I just think specifically of Cordes and Krista.
Okay, well, we can
as
take a look
as
at
an
that.
idea that we kick around.
Yeah, all right. Other items? Couple things that I would anticipate coming up in the next month or two would be our plans for 21, 22, what's coming up next year, what's going to be done differently or returned to or whatever. And also, as I mentioned when we were talking about the assessment, in June, we get to the student achievement section of the strategic plan, and so I think it would make sense for us to go more in depth into some of that information. If you have other ideas, send them along. Otherwise, anything else for the good of the order? You just want to stay here another hour?
Oh, never mind. A good one.
Okay, we are adjourned.
I'm a very distractible child in school.
Were you?
It's good because I ran out of Diet Coke.
I was going to say, you're
I don't have any more.
Yeah.
Oh, man,
Carl,
we got some up in the fridge upstairs.
Oh, my gosh. If I'd have known, I'd have.
It's
Carl, I
a
do
rare
have to
thing, it
say-
says take one.
What's that?
I tell people the sound of a